Press the button.
I didn't even know
I pressed
Johansson was
it.
injured.
Hello, we are live.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us for episode 386, the live recording, the
Oh,
raw, uncut episode 386 of Keeping Karlsson.
Do you think there's anybody in the world whose favorite number is 386?
I mean,
I would bet
that sounds
against it.
unlikely.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of people in the world. So
there are. But
what, do you have a favorite number?
No. Like if you made me choose one, like I would, but it wouldn't mean anything to me. Do you have a favorite number?
I mean, I like 65 for Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, I like 11 for Daniel Alfredsson.
So then it's hard. Yeah, all the people who are sports fans aren't going to have their favorite number be 386. So yeah, it's probably not too likely.
I know B-Man's favorite number is 32.
The one who won the Michael Raffle?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Shirt has been ordered, but it might not get delivered until 2022.
No,
so,
damn.
No rush.
Yeah, we just can't keep our shirts in stock.
Yeah, we have too many to send out. Mathieu is here. Hello, my friend. Hello, Sir Fonty. All right, I guess if now that we've got quorum.
And hello to Josh. We know you're out there. We still love you.
He's long gone. He likes the FHFH podcast instead.
Oh yeah? Is that true?
I don't know. We haven't heard anything about him.
Well, but do we know he's left us for another podcast?
I assume. There's no way to know. All right. So I guess I'll start the show. Here we go. Let's knock this baby out. Oh yeah, Sir Fonty's favorite number is a lot of people. That's probably the most common favorite number, right? 69. Like if we were to make a histogram or whatever, like of all the favorite numbers, you'd have like a really high peak at 60, like 68, like not many, 69, like huge, then back 70, back to just like, just back to low.
I have I teach students who are like in middle school. And so like a lot of them like say the word like 69, like 69 and 420, like all the time, nonstop, like when there's numbers or whatever. And like I asked one once, like, hey, what do you think that means? And like, I don't know. It's the funny number. Like that's it. Like it's just a funny number without the full body of knowledge. Of course, at some point you do have to like share so they don't go into grade 9. There was also a period of time where like it was uncanny. I was teaching math and like any example I made up on the spot, the answer kept being 69. And it felt, like an unreasonable provocation.
I wonder if the teacher
like too much opportunity for for someone to like laugh or, get off track.
But I wonder if a parent is going to complain and say that you're teaching this perverted class.
We only learn through expressions that bring us to 69.
Right. All right. Well, now we definitely have quorum because Shams is here.
And
I believe it's Mathieu. I think Matthew. I'm pretty sure it's Matthew Innes.
Or Minnesota.
Right. Oh, look at you. Go wild. Kaprizov, so good.
I wonder if M. Innes is an Oda fan.
Let's do this, guys.
I think we should do it.
Yeah. Okay, no. How should I do it? I used to like think about how I'll yell yes, and now I just kind of have been doing the same thing all the time.
Just do it.
Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by two guys who, unlike the Florida Panthers, always show up with the people who we announced would be on the show earlier in the day. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me, once again, to break down all the hot streaks and cold streaks and injuries and outjuries from around the NHL to help you win your fantasy leagues, it's Brian Combe.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. Yes, welcome to another episode where we are really just trying to keep up with all the movement on rosters across the league. We had our whole sad injuries show, but guess what? It's another, we'll talk about hot and cold streaks for sure, but there's still a lot of injuries going around. Injuries are contagious in the NHL this season. I wonder if players were just less fit or something. And of course, there's the whole like non-COVID illness and COVID illness things. As we start, I'm seeing an update that Landeskog is not playing tonight. He's out 2 weeks. Kadri's still out day to day for like the umpteenth day. So we're going to be your guides to how to navigate this the very best way you can so that you can stay on top, hopefully, or get on top of your fantasy hockey leagues.
Yeah, we'll cover those abs injuries and how that helps Andrei Burakovsky, makes him worth holding. Spoiler alert. Yeah, also today, just in the, like I prepped this in the morning. I had some plans this afternoon. It's like driving back and I see that Duchesne and Ryan Johansson weren't playing for Nashville today. Kyrou was out for St. Louis. It's like random. We're playing a really weird game, everybody. It's kind of like, what are we doing? Sometimes I ask, like, I've never played a board game like this. Or just, I guess one of these games where you just pick up a card that could be just like, you lose. And like, oh no. And then just like all the pieces, like a baby's running across the board, knocking all the pieces all over the place, and you're not allowed to like put them back. It's just like you just have to deal with it now. That's the kind of game I feel like we're playing sometimes. So we'll get into all of it. There's also obviously players who always benefit. What did you say last week, Brian? When there's a door that closes, a window opens, or another door opens, or something's opening when a door closes. So
something like that. So we're going to try and find the open doors.
Yes, that's the goal of Keeping Karlsson this year. Before we get to all of that, let's of course mention that Keeping Karlsson is very proudly presented by DobberHockey.com, your #1 fantasy hockey website and resource out there. Great articles. And I say this every week. It's true. I go there all the time. It's like the best site. I feel like I shouldn't even have to sell it. Just go to DobberHockey.com and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's all the latest updates about the news and notes around the NHL, plus the tools at Frozen Tools just can't be matched. We get tweets every once in a while like, hey, Brian, where do you see the goals saved above average numbers that you reference on the show? It's at Frozen Tools. The answer to every question. There's other sites also, but Frozen Tools has it all. So that's DobberHockey.com.
Yeah, that's great. We should also, why don't we shout out? We're presented by DobberHockey.com, but also if you do ask where we get some numbers, I also really like Evolving Hockey for some goalie numbers. There was a nice little Twitter conversation on it earlier this week. But if you are ever wondering about where we get stuff, like Elon said, very likely Frozen Tools, it's some version of it is on Frozen Tools, or the only version or the actual version we use. But if you're also wondering about anything else we talk about, never be shy to reach out and ask.
Yeah, here's a question right here in the chat. Nathaniel's asking, how do you get short shifts? So Keeping Karlsson is not only a YouTube video for the people watching live on YouTube, we're also a podcast. And how podcasts work is you can subscribe on your Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, and you'll be subscribed to our podcast feed. And we definitely recommend you to subscribe because then you get every single episode that comes out on the feed, which are our Sunday mega shows and short shifts every Tuesday and Thursday. And Ben and Lewis are doing an amazing job with those. Last week we had Victor Nuno from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast step in for Lewis for one episode, and it was amazing. So yeah, great job to the Short Shifts crew. And now, Brian, let's get on with this week's content because we've got a lot to get to this week as per usual. I wanted to, not just start with injuries. Let's start with some good news here and talk about some hot streaks and I guess some cold streaks going around the league. We have to start right at the top of the list with, I think, one of the hottest players in the league right now, Austin Matthews. Remember, he had that slow start to start the season. He had no points in his first 3 games. People were wondering, is there something wrong? Like the Leafs came out, sluggish to start the season. Matthews, I believe, was hurt for a little bit. Then he came back, didn't get points for a little bit. Anyways, we said on the show, of course, it was definitely one of the easier takes we had to make. It was just like, I think Austin Matthews is going to be just fine. He was taking like a lot of shots in those games. Anyways, ever since then, like it's been gangbusters, right? He had a goal and an assist in the 5-4 win over Chicago yesterday. That extended his point streak to 9 games in which he scored at least a goal in all but one of those games. So it's not just a point a game. He's getting a goal every single game. 11 goals over those past 9 games. 16 points in his last 19 games. Wait, that's not right. I think it's 16 points over his last 9 games. No, Brian, I blame you. You should have told me in his last 9 games because I wrote it. It's obviously incorrect. Okay.
You never check my numbers
because I wrote it first. Okay. 16 points in his last 9. Okay. 11 goals in that span. 16 points in that. 11 goals in that span, 16 points in that span. So yeah, Matthews has been amazing lately. He's been a guaranteed hit for the Timmy's gang. We're having a lot of fun on our Discord playing the Tim Hortons game. We have to predict who's going to score goals every night. Whenever Matthews shows up, okay, guaranteed win tonight because he always scores a goal. Even with all these goals, though, Matthews is only tied for 3rd in the league in goals. He has 18 goals in 26 games. That ties him with Kyle Connor. He's 2 behind Ovechkin, who has 20, and 5 behind Draisaitl, who has 23. So that's Draisaitl, Ovi, Connor, Matthews. That's the top 4 in the Rocket Richard race. Brian, I guess you've already read my notes, but listeners, take a second, try to guess who are the next 2 that are tied behind Matthews and Connor. Again, Matthews and Connor have 18 goals. These next 2 players both have 17 goals. I'm telling you right now, you're not going to be able to guess unless you're like really dialed in. Brian, did you know before you read my notes?
I did, but only because I had seen a tweet about it not long ago.
Oh, okay. Chris Kreider and Andrew Mangiapane both have 17 goals to tie for fifth in the league. Of course, the big difference between them and some of the players ahead of them are that they have 4 and 3 assists each, while the others are all in the double digits of assists. So in terms of total points, Kreider and Mangiapane are having good seasons, but not like elite seasons like your Matthews and your Dreisaitl's, etc. But yeah, good for them, scoring a lot of goals, putting a lot of pucks behind the goalies. Anyway, of course, many of Matthews' goals have been assisted by Mitch Marner, but unfortunately, Mitch Marner was put on the LTIR on Saturday and likely won't be back until the new year with his shoulder injury. So taking a look at the new lines for the Leafs, Matthews was centered most recently. Sorry, the Leafs. Matthews has been centering recently, aligned with Michael Bunting and Brian, your longtime favorite, Ondrej Kase. Over there on line 1, he's also taken Marner's spot on the top power play, and he assisted on Matthews' first period power play goal on Saturday along with Nylander, and that assist brought Kase to 7 points in his last 7 games. So Brian, do people need to drop everything right now and add Kase if he's somehow still available to them? Like, to me, he's looking like he's in one of the best spots in the league because he's able to feed the puck to Austin Matthews, who, like we just talked about, scores goals every single game on both even strength and the power play. How can you go wrong?
Exactly. So my answer is yes. And before I to explain why it's a yes, that you should go ahead and add Ondrej Kase if he's available to you because he plays with Austin Matthews. Let's first at least talk a little bit about Austin Matthews, who at 5-on-5, he actually looks pretty human. Like, he's not doing anything over and above impressive at 5-on-5 this season. But then you dig down and you see, oh, well, like his on-ice shooting percentage at 5-on-5 is below 7%. That's like probably at least 3% too low. His own shooting percentage is 10% at 5-on-5 versus his usual 15%. Matthews also has low points participation right now, but he's putting up his best shot rates and expected goal rates of his career. So this is just to say, watch out, world. Austin Matthews has more to give at 5-on-5 than what we've been seeing so far. Of course, no one's really missing that 5-on-5 production because Matthews on the power play has been superhuman. 14 power play points in 26 games. Compare that to 13 power play points in 52 games last year. That's right. Austin Matthews is on a 44 power play point pace. He's amazing. Austin Matthews is awesome. This 100+ point season looks like it's happening. He's pacing for 57 goals, looks legit. Last year, I remember looking into Matthews' numbers when he was pacing for 65, and I'm like, I'm going to find something that tells me he's not. It's like, oh my gosh, no. If Matthews played an 82-game season last year, he had a pretty good shot of scoring 65 times. Elon, you talked last week about wanting to go see Ovechkin, as the world's greatest goal scorer while you can before he retires, and you still should. But if you want to see the guy who's going to be the best goal scorer in the league for the next decade, go see Austin Matthews. And if you want to roster the guy who's going to be playing alongside the best goal scorer right now today, then go ahead and add Ondrej Kase, who, by the way, his hits and blocks are good too right now, especially from a forward perspective. You mentioned, Elon, like, I've had this thing for Ondrej Kase over the course of his career, especially early on when he was taking a pile of shots and looked like a dangerous shooter, but then a mix of injuries and also just not delivering means that Kase has been stuck in bottom 6 roles for a long while now. But now that Kase is playing up above 16 minutes a night again in a top line role with Austin Matthews, also taking 3 or 4 shots per game, the way he did before his career was derailed by head injuries, I'm into Ondrej Kase. You want the guy playing with Austin Matthews, and it's a bonus that Kase's on the top power play and takes shots himself too. He's not just playing with Austin Matthews. And that's kind of like the comparison to Michael Bunting, who's averaging 2 shots per game, whereas Kase's getting 3 or 4 in recent outings. So I would take Kase for sure. I would add him out of free agency. And if you have like the Kase Bunting combo, that's great. Enjoy them both. I don't know that I'd drop Bunting for Kase just because Bunting seems the safer bet long term, and Marner's going to be back before too long. But yeah, if you're looking really short term, I think I like Kase more because of the shot volume. But if you're looking medium or long term, I'd still prefer Bunting.
Right, yeah. So in your like super deep leagues where this is a roster spot that you're filling for a long time, yeah, the Bunting's the one who's more likely, like you say, to stay on the top line. But definitely if you're in a shallower league where Bunting is currently in free agency, leave him there and grab Kasha because he's the one who's definitely more exciting at the moment, at least in my opinion. Seems like you agree. Yeah, so that's a fun start to the show. So when you go on Yahoo and you're looking at the top percentage rostered players, you get a bunch of guys, including obviously Austin Matthews. You also see another player that's on the opposite side right now in terms of the hot versus cold streak. That's Patrick Kane, who went scoreless in that game versus Toronto on Saturday. That was his third time in 4 games that Patrick Kane didn't get a point. In that one game where he did get a point, it was just an assist. He only has 5 points in his last 11 games now. Brian, I can't even recall a time since we've started doing the podcast that we had a Patrick Kane cold streak like this, like over 10 games and him being only half point per game. Usually he's close to a point per game, and if he's like cold, it would be like 7 points in 10 games. So I'm very curious to know what's going on here. Coach Derek King has been mixing up the lines, trying to get things going in Chicago. It really, you can't even rely on the lines that you see because they're changing it all the time. Yesterday, it looks like Kane and DeBrincat were being centered by Kirby Dach to start the game, and then Dylan Strome took over at some point. Dach went to centering a line with Kubalik and Kurashev, by the way, and Kubalik scored a goal to end a cold funk of his own. So Brian, anyways, back to Patrick Kane, though. How concerned should people be about this guy at this point? He's down to 22 points in 23 games on the season. So that just goes to show that he started pretty strong, though even like a point per game for Patrick Kane isn't that great, right? Like he's been pacing near 100 over the past few years. Right now he's down pacing below 80. What do you think is going to happen moving forward? Is this finally the time when the great Patrick Kane slows down a bit?
Last year, Patrick Kane actually slowed down a little bit too in one way. He paced for just 22 goals last season, which would have been the lowest goal total for Patrick Kane since his rookie campaign, where he had 21 goals back in 2007, 2008. And 22 goals also falls a fair deal below most of Patrick Kane's seasons since the lockout shortened 2012-13 season. So, Patrick Kane deserved to have paced for so few goals. Last season, he had the lowest expected goals rates of his career. His shot rates were down too, but we didn't really notice this was happening to Patrick Kane because he was piling up the assists on the power play. He had 19 power play assists to go along with 3 power play goals for 22 power play points in 56 games last season. It's not quite what Austin Matthews is doing this year, but it's also not that far off. It would have been in line or actually above what Patrick Kane's usual power play high watermark has been over the course of his career. So Patrick Kane, just to summarize, last year, trouble goal scoring, but covered it up with some amazing power play production. This year, Patrick Kane is also still pacing for a similar number in like the low 20 goals range, but unlike last year, under the hood, Patrick Kane has actually rebounded to look more like the way he did in recent 30 and 40 goal seasons. Like he has a low shooting percentage this season, 7% versus usual 12%. He only has 4 goals on 54 shots at 5-on-5. He should probably have a couple more than that. This year he's doing fine on the power play, but nothing special. So that's not covering up anything he's losing due to bad variance at 5-on-5. But I will still say that not all is rosy with Patrick Kane just because things look good under the hood for him and it looks like bad variance. And there is one thing that's working against Patrick Kane this year, and it was working against him last year too. And that's that I don't think Patrick Kane has found the right centerman the last couple years. Pius Suter didn't work well as a centerman last year. Kirby Dach hasn't worked this year. Dylan Strome was the last centerman that Patrick Kane really clicked with. And before that, Taves and Artem Anisimov were like safe havens for Patrick Kane most of the time. And I can tell you this because it bears out in Kane's on-ice numbers. His shot share and on-ice expected goals rates are down a good deal. Like they're down about half an expected goal per 60 minutes than they were in the Taves and Anisimov days. And he's in a really bad place right now at 5-on-5, scoring really just 2 on-ice expected goals per 60 minutes, which is like, that's weak. That's not what we'd expect for the on-ice performance of a team with Patrick Kane being one of the players on the ice. And that's similar to last season too. Patrick Kane's, like the on-ice production for Chicago with Patrick Kane on the ice has been really sad the last couple years versus where it was when Patrick Kane was on lines and with centerman that seemed to work better for him. So it's good to see the new coach Derek King trying new things, including trying Patrick Kane back with Strome to see if that Kane Strome to Brinkett magic can be rekindled. But I am definitely, like you're asking me, how concerned are we that he's not pacing for 100 points? I'm a little worried that 33-year-old Patrick Kane can't get back up to that 100-point pace we've come to expect from him until he finds an on ice situation that works for him, which we just haven't seen. So this isn't to say I'm giving up on Patrick Kane being a 100-point player, but it's time. I think I've said this a couple times this season about various other players. It's time to at least raise an eyebrow and reconsider or be open to reconsidering what we can expect from Patrick Kane, who, yeah, has been a lock for 90 to 100 points for so many of the last recent seasons. And maybe now he's closer to that point per game range if his line can't figure stuff out.
Right. Okay. So basically, you're saying if you have Patrick Kane in your league, you want to play the first part of your answer to the people you're trying to trade with about how you're saying under the hood, he's getting a little bit of bad variance. We expect things to be a little bit better, and not play that second part where you still have concerns that he might not be able to get back to the glory days. And yeah, maybe there's still a lot of people who are happy to believe that this is just a cold stretch and he's still a lock to get the 100 points. And so maybe now's a good time to flip him before it's too late. Though at the same time, you might just want to hold on unless you could get a really good return, because at the end of the day, he's still Patrick Kane, and maybe something will work, including this being centered by Dylan Strome. Though we've seen this a few times, hasn't stuck. Looking to next week, though, like Chicago actually has one of the best schedules. If you're playing in a weekly league, Chicago is the only team that plays Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then they also play Saturday. So a lot of people are going to be looking at Chicago players to stream in, and there's really like no exciting options. Like to me, like Dylan Strome maybe jumps out if he's going to actually stay centering Kane and DeBrincat. Though, I mean, aside from Kane, DeBrincat, and like Seth Jones, and obviously Marc-Andre Fleury, I guess like there's not really any player on Chicago I could think of that are rostered in all but the deepest of leagues, or that should be. So Brian, let's say you have an open spot, or let's say it's not an open spot, but you have like some player that's only playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and you've already checked your lineups and they're going to be on your bench all 3 of those days. I had Alex Iafallo in Kakupful, and I actually dropped him yesterday, not because I'm like super down on Iafallo, but I just looked and was like, I'm not going to get any games from him until at least Sunday. So I figured I might as well drop him for a Chicago player where I'll get 3 games. And I added Dominic Kubalik because he was available in free agency. He actually scored a goal yesterday for what it's worth. But like I said, that broke a long cold streak. Let's say you have all the Chicago players available, aside from, again, Kane, DeBrincat, and Seth Jones, and Marc-Andre Fleury. Who would be your target to stream in? So we're looking at Jonathan Taves, potentially, Kubalik. Hagel had a run, like Strome, who I said is now centering a good line, but also gets healthy scratched every once in a while. Anyone jumping out at you as like the one to go after to try to get those extra games next week?
Elon, anybody on the Discord server, on our patrons only Discord server, already knows this, but I held Jonathan Taves for 25 goalless games this season. 25 games of him doing essentially nothing for my Cupful team, like way below replacement level. Just it was a mix of being patient and having other injuries happen to my team where like I was out of moves to drop Taves and add someone else. But over 25 games, you'd think something would have happened. And I finally cut the cord earlier this week after one more goalless game where he didn't even take a shot. And Jonathan Taves has goals in consecutive games since then. Like when you asked at the start of the like the show, it's like, how do we play this game? Like this is just random stuff happening with injuries. Well, this is random stuff happening with John. Like I can't help but take this personally that Jonathan Taves finally scored not just once, but twice in consecutive games for the first time he was on none of my lineups. I had him in a bunch of leagues this year thinking that I was going to see good things, but I actually have seen really bad things. There was one moment where I saw like some kind of recovery from a really bad start from Jonathan Taves, but even since then, it's been pretty dire. And I don't expect him to actually be good. He scored twice on 3 shots. If you're going to stream someone in, sure, yeah. Like you could go Taves, you could go Strome if he's playing as Kane centerman. I'd want Kane centerman is probably like the answer I'd give you. Like, so check Game Day Lines on Twitter at Game Day Lines, or Game Day Line Tweets is the website. You can get the link from it from the Twitter account. But I would just look and see who's playing with Patrick Kane and or Alex DeBrincat and take that guy, because that guy has the best chance at delivering. Kubalik, same story. Super inconsistent, often worthless, and then like you said, yeah, he might score a goal here and there. So you're looking for lotto tickets here. I'm not convinced, Elon, even necessarily that um, it's worth dropping someone who's not going to play a game for you this week for one of these Chicago guys. That's how down I am on them, because these Chicago guys in the Cupful, that's the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patrons Fantasy League, kkupfl.com. If you like went for Kubalik or Taves and they got you an average of like 1.5 fantasy points per game over the 3 games, that is unlikely to be the difference in your fantasy matchup. And that's like at least 2 points below replacement value of the guy, whoever you dropped, because they weren't going to get games for you. So that's where I'm at. Obviously, like this is personal for me. I'm really disappointed with all of what Chicago has offered. Sure, anybody can pan out, but there's no reason to expect that one guy will over another. It's just it's a total lottery.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I will just say that the way I play is I'm going to try to maximize. There's no point holding someone that's not going to play, and 1.5 points per game. Even these Chicago players that have struggled all year have had more than that in the couple. We're talking closer to 2.5 points per game. So that's already you're approaching 8-9 points on the week if they play the 4 games. But yeah, well, obviously anything could happen. I'll just put it out in the universe that Kubalik, after having a bunch of games of 1 and 2 shots, has had 3 and 4 shots his last couple games. So he's my pick just because he's the one I have. Okay, let's go next to another cold streak over in Carolina, where Andrei Svechnikov went pointless for the 3rd straight game on Saturday in Carolina's 3-1 win over Edmonton. He only has 1 goal and no assists in his last 6 games, only 2 goals and no assists in his last 9 games. Now, Carolina is playing tonight. We're recording this, it's 8:23 p.m. now Eastern, and I see they're playing Vancouver at 10. So maybe by the time people listen to this tomorrow, Svechnikov will have had a huge breakout. So keep that in mind before you listen too carefully to our analysis. But still, he's having trouble putting up points, and it kind of makes sense. Especially it makes sense that he's having trouble picking up assists because he's been playing away from his polar opposite in hotness in Sebastian Aho for a while now. Sebastian Aho is on fire. He's getting multiple points every game, scoring a ton of goals. I picked him in the Timmy's Gang selections for tonight, and I did not pick Svechnikov. And look, Saturday, Svechnikov's line was him, Vincent Trocheck, and Jesper Fast, which isn't amazing. Trocheck, we've talked about his struggles, and Jesper Fast, isn't the kind of guy you're going to get excited about having on your other wing. Svech has still been on the top power play, didn't get in. He was on the ice, I assume, but he wasn't in on Aho's first period power play goal on Saturday. So Brian, we just talked about Patrick Kane. Svechnikov, obviously at a different stage of his career, but in a similar stage this season where he's someone people drafted super high. He had hot runs at one point, but now he's been running cold for a little bit. So comparing him to Patrick Kane, how much should Svechnikov managers panic? It's obviously never a great feeling to see a player you picked in the top couple rounds of your draft struggling to produce for you. So if you have him, is this a situation where, we're going to have to lower our expectations like you said about Kane, or is this just great opportunity if you don't have him to try to get him, and if you do have him, don't worry about it. It's Andrei freaking Svechnikov.
I would venture towards the latter, but that's only because Svechnikov's bar is lower than Patrick Kane's, right? So it's going to be easier to meet. Svechnikov's expectations on draft day, he can probably still live up to those. It's unfortunate because we've talked about how Svechnikov, if he was given straight through top line, top power play deployment, he could be a 90+ point player. But it's frustrating to see that Rod Brindamore line blender make him a victim so often of these depth chart changes. It has been a real cold stretch for Svechnikov lately, though. 7 goals in his first 7 games to start the year had us all super excited, being yeah, huge breakout coming. Then only 2 goals for Svechnikov in his last 18 games. That's rough. The silver lining is that Svechnikov has 51 shots over those 18 games. So that's a nice number of shots, almost 3 per game. And it means Svechnikov is shooting just 4%. We know he's at least a 10% shooter. So the goals will return in time, especially since he's putting up career high 5-on-5 expected goal rates. His deployment is just really the cause for concern, though, as I said, and I think it holds him to a 70-point range if he can't lock on to that top line or even a surefire second line. I find it strange that he's lacking all these assists, though. As you mentioned, his goal scoring isn't there, but his assists also aren't there. He's good on ice numbers, though only 8 goals have been scored while Svechnikov is on the ice over his last 9 games. And prior to that, he was on the ice for an average of 1.5 or 2 goals per game. So this is all to say Svechnikov still looks good, when he's on the ice, Carolina still looks good. I think this is more just a victim of variance and also less than ideal deployment. So I would say Svechnikov, like you asked my concern level, it's probably similar to Patrick Kane, but I have a little more faith in Svechnikov and what I'm seeing there. But again, that might just be because it's easier for Svechnikov to hit 70 still than it is for Patrick Kane to hit 100. And both these guys, Kane and Svechnikov, it doesn't look like it's entirely up to them. They're amazing players who can do they can do good things on their own, but clearly to be elite, they're still going to need some line mates and idealized time.
Yeah, like when Svechnikov was when Svechnikov was with Aho, like everything was glorious, and now it's not as great playing with Trocheck. And yeah, at this point, a 70-point pace would probably be just fine for people who have him, at least in the short term, a lot better than only 2 goals in his last 9 games. So hopefully he wakes up soon. One player who is the one benefiting and playing with Sebastian Aho, so maybe to Svechnikov's detriment, is Nino Niederreiter, who you said last week, we already said to grab him, but I just want to reiterate that Nino Niederreiter is super hot. He's playing with Aho and Teravainen, and it's been a really good run for him. His goal yesterday on Saturday brought him to 9 points in his previous 8 games. At this point, Brian, let's say Nino's available, and let's say a guy we talked about at the start, Andre Kasha. Both of those guys are available, both playing with these elite players. Who would you rather have for, not long term, like a short term, 2 weeks, like until Christmas? Who do you want, Nino or Kasha?
That's a really, really good question. I think, so what is the latest on Marner? We should be clear. What's the latest
so
on
he
Marner?
just was put on LTIR, which means I think he's like done for the month, and then like he could come back like in January, I think is the idea.
Okay, I read that, but I didn't, like usually when they put someone, okay. So
let's say while Marner is out, who would you rather have between Kasha and Nino?
Okay, as long as Marner is out, I will take Kasha. He seems settled in there. Of course, the biggest risk to Kasha is that he gets injured again, which always happens. Unfortunately, when you have one head injury, it's easier to get another and then another and another. And that's what's happened to Andre Kasha. So I would prefer him, assuming he stays healthy. Nino is probably the better medium to long-term hold because I think he could probably stay up on the top line longer than Kasha. But short-term, Elon, that was the question. I will go Kasha.
Okay, yeah, I think it could definitely go either way. Maybe just for fun. I'll lean Nino. I don't think it's worth making a bet over because it sounds like you're pretty 50-50 yourself. Yeah. But Kasha, he's great. I guess Nino, like we saw a really good run from him last year, so I guess I'll go with like in my head, like the somewhat safer guy. But yeah, definitely, why not both, right? If you're listening to this and both are available in free agency, you definitely want to take a look at your team because both of them are in really great spots. That's basically a lot of the game of fantasy hockey, right? Like obviously you want to get your elite players when you can. You want to hopefully not get the bad luck of injuries, not get the bad luck of having drafted Patrick Kane in the first round and have him go on a cold streak because there's nothing you could really do about that. But I think the real thing, and that's what we talk about on the show, right? We're trying to help point out the players if they're on a good line and they're producing. That's someone you probably want to get on your team. All right, Brian, let's switch to goalies for a bit now, and we'll do some cold streaks to start and then some hot streaks. But one goalie that is super high rostered on Yahoo, still 99% rostered, but I wonder if it's going to start falling soon, is Robin Lehner, because he just hasn't been playing well lately. And again, just like with Carolina, Vegas is going to play today. I don't even think they've announced the goalie, and they're starting in like 30 minutes. It's going to be Vegas against Minnesota, which again, could be a rough game for Lehner because he'll be going against Kirill Kaprizov, who's been amazing.
They just announced Robin Lehner. It's confirmed.
All right, so maybe like by the end of the show, we'll be able to give an update on how he's doing. But yeah, before today, his last game was on Wednesday versus Dallas, where he let in 3 goals on 10 shots before he got pulled for Brossois. Before that, Lehner had a good game on Sunday versus Calgary, but before that, he got dinged for 5 goals against versus Anaheim, and that's kind of been Lehner's pattern lately. Like he kind of alternates between good and bad starts, which is not what you want from a goalie that you picked as maybe like a top 5 goalie in your draft. You want to get a little bit more consistency there. Altogether, Lehner's numbers going into today are like a 906 save percentage in his 20 games, which if that sticks for the whole year, that'll be his worst save percentage since way back in 2014-15 when he put up a 905 save percentage with the Sens in his last season in Ottawa. So, Brian, we posited going into the season that this would be like a unique challenge for Lehner because for so long now, he's been in a tandem. He's been putting up these great numbers, but remember, he was with Varlamov on the Islanders, and he was with Crawford in Chicago, then he was with Fleury in Vegas, and so yeah, when he was coming in 50% of the games, he was putting up great numbers, but now, it's a whole different animal to actually have to play game in, game out, keep yourself in the right mental and physical condition to be able to do that. So far, it's kind of looking like, again, he's not like a train wreck, but it's not looking like he's like up to the task of being an elite volume goalie. He was like an elite, 50% goalie. So Brian, are we at a point now where we're just going to have to downgrade Leonard and just not consider him a high-end starter? Like, he's on a good team. He plays a decent amount, unless you're going to say you're so worried that Brossois is going to start eating into more starts. But like, obviously you're going to want to have a goalie that's like on a good team. But at the same time, I don't know. He just, to me, like, does not have that same appeal that he had going into the year. And you just need to now tell me if that's just like a matter of me being too biased by a small sample size, or if you're agreeing with me that things just aren't looking as great as we thought they could be.
I think things aren't looking as great as we thought they could be for two reasons. And the first is on the team level. Like you said, Robin Lehner playing for a great team should be working out better. But remember last week when we were talking about the surprising teams we were seeing ranked at the bottom of the NHL in 5-on-5 defense based on like the danger level of chances they're giving up on a nightly basis? Well, Vegas is right there. They rank 31st overall in expected goals against per 60 minutes. Only Philadelphia is allowing more expected goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 than Vegas. And that shows up in Robin Lehner's numbers. He is posting his lowest 5-on-5 expected save percentage of his career. Translation, that means Lehner is facing the heaviest workload he's ever had. And this is a guy who played for Chicago a couple years ago, whose whole strategy was to hang their goalie out to drive, whose whole strategy was to hang Robin Lehner or Corey Crawford out to dry, and they'll bail us out. That was the whole thing. And I think in Vegas, I'm not sure how much of this is a systems change and how much of it is the impact of having lost Mark Stone and Alec Martinez and Max Pacioretty for such big stretches of the year. And good for Robin Lehner. His expected save percentage is low, but he's still outperforming it at 5-on-5 and on the penalty kill. So good for Robin Lehner, playing better than an average NHL goalie would given the same workload difficulty. So to me, Robin Lehner still looks like a good starter, but he's on a team that's making him one of the most vulnerable goalies in the league, even more vulnerable, ironically enough, than Marc-Andre Fleury, who is now over in Chicago. But here's the thing that I didn't expect to find looking into Robin Lehner. Amongst starters with similar value, he's just not, like, he's outperforming his expected save percentage at 5-on-5, but Lehner is not anywhere near setting the world on fire. He's holding his own. He's like a top 20 goalie, but we've thought of him, or I should say maybe I've thought of Robin Lehner as being better than that, better than a top 20 goalie. I made the case a couple years ago that I thought Robin Lehner had a chance to be the best goalie in the NHL. And so this is really disappointing that he's just kind of like, playing a little better than average at 5-on-5, and his quality start percentage is 45%. So Robin Lehner very much falling into, decent territory, which is maybe what he just is now that we have a few years of numbers to look at, getting out of Buffalo and working on his overall physical and importantly mental health. It looked like Lehner was finding a new gear, and I think he did, but it's just not as high a gear as I was hoping based on the early returns from his time with Long Island and then Chicago. So I'm downgrading what I think about Robin Lehner's upside to being like, he's a good goalie, he's on a good team, he should be fine, but he's not amongst the league's elite, and certainly not, I don't think in the, he was, I think, one of the first goalies drafted in so many fantasy leagues. I don't think he quite deserved to be based on who obviously that's easy to say, right? Based on his performance this year, he hasn't earned that right or privilege to have been drafted so early. He's not playing up to his draft potential, but I don't think that's an aberration. I think we just overrated him going into the season.
I think a lot of people expected, okay, Fleury's gone, it's Lehner's time, like, let's rank him super high. And a lot of leagues, I think it was Vasilevsky, then Hellebuck, and then Lehner. And I think if we were to, redraft right now, maybe he'd go 10th or 12th or 15th. I'm not sure exactly. Actually, so with all that in mind, we actually got a really good question on Twitter from @AdamLewis91, who asked us, I'm not sure exactly what his situation is, but he asked us to compare Lehner and Thatcher Demko and say who we'd rather have. And Thatcher Demko is kind of like the opposite of Lehner in a lot of ways. Like, so Demko started the season like pretty rough, like a lot of the Canucks, right? The Canucks were like terrible, but now he's gotten on a roll. He's had 3 fantastic starts over this past week, stopping 34 of 37 in the win over Winnipeg on Friday. He stopped 35 of 36 in the win over Boston on Wednesday. He stopped all the shots on Monday in the shutout over the Kings. Like I said, Vancouver's playing Carolina later today, so we'll see how he does against Aho and Nino and Sveshnikov and company. So in case you didn't catch it, that's 3 wins in a row for Demko and 3 wins in a row for the Canucks ever since Bruce Boudreau has taken over as the coach. And if you recall, going into the season, I was like high on Demko. I think higher than you, just in terms of like, I was like, I really like the thing that I liked about Demko, and that was what I said. I don't even know if this is like based on actual data or anything, but he just seemed to me like the type of goalie that's capable and going on like these long runs of success. Like maybe overall in the season, he won't be like sparkling and reliable, but like when he gets hot, it just seems like he can go and just put up like great game after great game, like high volume. And last year he did it for a run. Obviously there was that playoff run for Vancouver where he did it, and it's looking to me like maybe he's getting into one of those runs right now. So I don't know. I answered Adam's question and said I'd take Demko over Leonard. I'm curious to know, Brian, what do you think about this advice? Like, I feel like on one hand, yeah, Vegas is a better team, but on the other hand, Demko seems to be a better goalie from what we've seen so far. Plus, I'm also just starting to get excited about maybe under a new coach, maybe Vancouver's not as bad. It's only been 3 games, but maybe they're not as bad as they were looking, a couple months ago.
Sorry. I think where we disagreed on Demko coming into the season was not whether he was going to be good. It was just how good a team he was on and how well he'd be able to do on that team, especially around wins. Like, I think I was more with you than you realize on Demko having good rate stats. Although, like you said, you weren't sure if there was enough data to back it up, and you were going on a hunch that, yeah, Demko's the real deal. And I was saying the same thing. Like, we still don't know who Thatcher Demko is, but holy cow, is Thatcher Demko looked amazing this season. He's been a top 10 goalie in the league, bordering on top 5 goalie if you're going by the extent to which Demko is outplaying his expected save percentage at 5-on-5, which is what I go by when I'm trying to rank goalie performances. I'm definitely with you, Elon, in suggesting Demko over Laner. I just going back, I didn't think Demko, no matter how well he played in Vancouver, could play well enough to steal enough wins in leagues where wins made up a big part of your goalie value. In leagues with just rates and volume, Demko continues to be a great play if you don't need those wins. And hey, with Bruce Boudreau, like you're saying, Elam, maybe there's a better chance of Demko picking up some wins and getting some overall support. This isn't a hard one for me, especially now that I've downgraded Laner. Demko's got a .915 save percentage on the season. The one thing about him, and maybe this will stabilize now that there's a new coach, because like in Vancouver, we've talked about, I'm not going to rub it in, it's been a disaster all season long. So Demko, even with a .915 save percentage, just 52% quality starts. So that's what I'd like to change for Demko going forward. And I think that's all there really is to say about it. I'm not sure. Like I said, I'm changing my take on Demko here as much as I'm changing my take on Laner. But in case it wasn't clear before, yes, I think Thatcher Demko is good.
All right. Yeah, it'll be fun to do another Schmore. Maybe we got to do another mid-season Schmore Goalies board. Maybe we could. Will Nadeau, if you're listening, hit us up. We should maybe do a show where we re-rank the goalies, because, yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of changes from what we thought going into the year. Unfortunately for Leonard, fortunately for Demko. Brian, so I still have a few more goalies I want to get to, then a bunch of other content. And we're going to get to all of that in just a sec. But first, let's thank a sponsor for this week's episode of Keeping Karlsson. And just like that... for this week's episode of Keeping Karlsson, and just like that, why can't I say it? And just like last week, we're once again proudly being sponsored by our friends over at TickPick. So the hockey season is well underway, and it's a good time to start going to see some games. It's like cold out, you don't want to go hang out in a park. You want to go to the rink and watch a game. Like assuming, you're following proper COVID protocols and all of that stuff. But if you want to go to see a game, you should use our friends at TickPick, because TickPick is the original no-fee ticket site and the only one you'll ever need as your go-to for all tickets for NHL today, also concerts, NFL, and, if you want a ticket to something, you're going to find it over at TickPick. Okay, so Brian, you said when we were talking about Matthews, how, like, I said last week that I'd be into seeing an OV game. You said, well, you should also see a Matthews game. Like, it's funny because you said, like, Matthews is the best goal scorer in the league, and now I'm thinking like I had said that he's actually like tied for third in goals, right? Like maybe Draisaitl, you could say, is the best goal scorer in the league. So you could get 2 for 1. Go see a McDavid and Draisaitl. There's like so many teams that I'm just really excited to see. And maybe it's me in my advanced age. I'm starting to wonder if like I need to go see these players live before it's too late and like my back will hurt too much and I won't be able to say that I got to see Dre and McDavid and Ovi and Matthews. So yeah, if you want to go see a game, why not go to TickPick? Because they've gotten rid of all those awful service fees that other ticket sites charge. They also guarantee the best prices. Like they're so confident in their prices that they say if you could find a better price for a hockey game on another site, they're going to match that price and give you 110% of the difference in that purchase price. That's how confident they are. So check it out. Tickpick.com, tickpick.com/Karlsson, and find yourself tickets to go watch a fun hockey game or concert or whatever. So thanks, TickPick. Thanks, TickPick. We're gonna cut over to one other ad break, and then we're gonna be back at you for an ad-free rest of the show. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right. The anxiety doing this read.
I wonder if it's like either the feeling about going to a game or like with COVID or not saying tick.
Oh, that's funny.
Softening that T.
So what's going on here with also in the chat here? Burakovsky is not on the top power play. All right. By the time we talk
on the top line, at least.
Is not that's pretty good. Rather have both.
Which I didn't think, like in my notes, I was like, you were ready to talk about him top line. Logan O'Connor was there, but now he's not.
Okay. And maybe by the time we get there, we'll have more data from today's game to go off of.
I can't wait. That's it. We use the hottest and freshest data.
Might as well.
Yeah.
Got it. The good thing about doing a podcast in 2021, it's all there waiting for us. We'd be fools not to use it.
When we started out, it wasn't. Yeah. Like we had Extra Skater.
We used to have.
Do you remember Extra Skater?
No, I don't. Regale me.
It was like when the original like first public any publicly or privately available stat sites and like all the whole team behind it was hired by the Maple Leafs. And I remember the moment of anxiety when Extra Skater closed. And I'm like, oh God, like the podcast is over. Like we can't find the stuff that was there. And for a few years, that cycle kept repeating. Luckily, Natural Stat Trick and Hockey Viz and Evolving Hockey.
Frozen Tools.
Saviors and Frozen Tools. Yeah, amazing that stuff is all. But that was it. That was it was Extra Skater. And the data wasn't even that, like, it was a lot of just shot share stuff, which we learned shortly after didn't have a lot of bearing on a player's fantasy value.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to do a hockey podcast now. You know, back when I did my first podcast ever, we used to record on tapes, and then I would record my side, then the other person would record their side, and then I would spool the tape together where I'd have to cut and like put it together and like connect it to get the conversation, and then I would mail it to YouTube.
Yeah,
and then they would then upload
I remember that.
Yeah, it was tough.
It's crazy.
All right, let's get back to it. All right, we are back. Brian, like I said, I want to get to some more goalie news here. Let's just knock out all the goalie talk right here, and then we'll get to some defensemen and then forwards to close out the show. So unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about injuries. Yesterday, John Gibson went down with a lower body injury in the 1-0 loss to the Penguins. The Ducks are playing again today. Obviously, Gibson isn't there. We don't yet know how long it'll be. Gibson is the type of goalie that sometimes goes day to day from my memory and then stay like that for like a month without really any update on when he'll be back. So hopefully that's not the case and he'll be back soon. But in the meantime, Anthony Stolarz has actually been having a low-key fantastic season. He had no goals against on the 13 shots he faced in relief for Gibson on Saturday. That was his third appearance out of his last 4 where he didn't let in a goal, as previously he shut out the Sabres and the Senators. And of course, that one other appearance in there that wasn't a shutout was not that great, like a 5 goals against outing versus Vegas. But hey, that was on 39 shots, and he got the win. So overall, Stolarz sits at a .931 save percentage in the 8 games he's appeared in, and he may need to take on a heavy workload in the short term if Gibson misses some time. So Brian, like, how quickly should people be rushing to add Stoli the goalie if he's still available and they need a goalie?
Sorry. Ancient K in the chat is like, are you joking? I think that's the delay I'm watching and what you're talking. Okay. Stoli the goalie. if you're looking for a goalie, you could definitely take a good, long, hard look at Stoli. Anthony Stolarz, we haven't seen a lot of him. 42 games over 5 years, and like no more than a small handful in any given year. But Anthony Stolarz, with this small career workload, he's going to turn 28 in January. Just 42 games under his belt, but has a 917 career save percentage. He seems like a guy who has a shot to carry some kind of meaningful workload. Like, I'm curious to see what he can get up to. I haven't ruled out the possibility, and like I wish imagine being Anthony Stolarz and waiting all this time to play 42 games. It's like you're not getting any younger, and maybe this is a time for Anthony Stolarz to show us who he is. And I hope he's good. He's never seen a lot of action, but Stolarz has almost always outplayed his expected save percentages at 5-on-5, which in my mind makes him worth a shot for sure. Keep in mind, Anaheim is a bottom 10 team in team defense at 5-on-5. You know, they're a team that's made for having a goalie like John Gibson. It's like, okay, we're going to play a little fast and loose defensively because we have John Gibson back there, who thankfully this year is on his game for the first time in a couple years, and he can bail us out. So we'll see if Stolarz can keep up or if Anaheim changes anything with him in net. But Anaheim is a good enough team to be interested in their starter, and Stolarz is a interesting enough guy to give a shot as your goalie.
Okay, yeah. I mean, times are tough sometimes. It's hard to find a goalie out there in free agency, and you might have a starter here in Stoli, who, by the way, it's 2 periods down in a game against St. Louis, and he's let in only 1 goal on 17 shots, or on 18 shots. It's 1-1. And by the way, Anaheim, the goal scored by them was Buddy Robinson, assisted by Sam Carrick and Nicholas Delorier. So definitely a schmoll there.
That's a schmoll.
And like, you know, that kind of leads into what we've got to do right now, which is a post-mortem on this 5-game week for Anaheim. Like last week we were talking about how, and you know, on Stream Scheme with Dave Bedden, he was talking about like, this is the week where you grab all your ducks, right? Because they're going to play so much, and anyone who rushed out to get their ducks probably weren't like too happy with the results. Like the top line, I'm going to call it the top line of Zegras, or sorry, Ben has corrected us as Zegris. So I want to make sure to get that right. So Trevor Zegras, Milano, Raquel, they were all good, right? They all put either 2 or 3 points in the 4 games so far. We'll see if they get anything today. Not amazing, but not bad. But pretty much everyone else was a bust. Like, nice to see that Ryan Getzlaf returned on Saturday to play with Troy Terry and Sam Steele. But of course, they were all shut out. The whole team was shut out. So far today, no points for that line or any of the lines aside from the what was it, Buddy Robinson line. So now things get interesting, right? Because the Ducks go from having a 5-game week to next week only playing 2 games on Wednesday and Friday. I wonder how quickly the percent rostered will like crater for anyone not on that line of Zegras, Milano, and Raquel. Like, I guess I'd hold Troy Terry and Ryan Getzlaf at least till Friday, right? See if they can reclaim that magic. I'm starting to get a little wary even about holding them, depending on how deep the league is. But fine, get there. You know, when you see like a 2-game week, then you think, oh, not even worth having them. But if it's 2 games before the weekend, like a lot of players are only playing 2 games before the weekend, and they're actually on off days. So maybe you could hold your duck through Wednesday, Friday. But if they still continue to be cold, maybe it's time to consider dropping for someone else that could help you on the weekend. And like aside from Terry and Getzlaf, like there's like no one that I'd want. You know, people were grabbing your Silverbergs and your Sam Steeles and I don't know, Lundestroms, who I think did score a goal for what it's worth. Like, I've got Shattenkirk in the cupful, and he's starting to look like someone I might drop. Like, I added Mark Giordano out of free agency. I don't know if people care about like these little nuances of how I'm managing my team, but like I grabbed Giordano out of free agency recently. I'm starting to think he's probably better than Shattenkirk. He might have just like, you know, leapfrogged him in the depth chart. Not that Giordano's been amazing, but he got a point yesterday. He's taken some shots, he blocks. Shattenkirk's really gone quiet, which I don't love, but of course I'm not too upset about now because I've already kind of replaced him. So maybe after Friday, he's a drop. So, what do you think? Like outside of this top line, are we ready to kind of tell people that the fun party in Anaheim is over, or would that be like a huge mistake and Anaheim might just go back to being this like super high shooting, high scoring, like exciting team that they were for the first part of the season?
The first thing to mention, and Ancient K100 is mentioning it in our live chat on YouTube. You can find us there, Keeping Karlsson, and listen live and join us for the live party time that we have. The Ducks only have those 2 games this upcoming fantasy week, but they're both on off days on Wednesday and Friday. So there's probably guys you have playing 3 times, but they're playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and don't fit into your lineup on any of those guys.
Can I interrupt? Like I said that whole exact thing.
Oh, okay. I thought you didn't.
I know. I said that they play Wednesday, Friday, and so a lot of people and their off day games. And I said like a lot of other players only also play 2 times. So I said hold them until the weekend. Like I said, this whole
Yeah.
schedule
Okay.
analysis.
All right. Okay. My bad.
No problem.
Okay. All right.
You know.
I just thought it was worth.
You could like harp, but maybe you could say like you said, or something. Not just
Sure.
so it doesn't sound as if you're just
Okay.
like.
Yep. So
again,
off,
I was like,
the
is
party
it time to like give up on this party? Is the party
Yeah.
over, or they're gonna go back to how they were?
Before you give up on the party in Anaheim because they're only playing twice, I'll just repeat what you said, Elon, which is that the Ducks only play twice, but they're both on off days. So you're likely to get more games played out of a Duck than out of somebody else near the bottom of your roster who's playing Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So it's not as bad as it looks if you own an Anaheim Duck. Though I do agree with your general statement, Elon, that guys in like Silverberg and Steele and Shattenkirk and Fowler, like in that tier, they're tough holds right now. But you're also making it sound, I feel like, that there aren't like there's a lot of rosterable guys in Anaheim. You're just saying like beyond 5 players in their top 6 out of their top 6, like there's not a whole lot of depth production, which is going to be true about most teams. It is disappointing though, because we thought maybe Silverberg would give us something, maybe Steele would give us something, Shattenkirk and Fowler. Also, Jamie Drysdale didn't even really get up to anything this week. And I'm looking at how the Ducks fared this week. They started the week with a 3-goal game, then scored 2 goals and 2 goals, and then got shut out. So I'm also wondering if they ran out of steam at some point. 5 games. That's a busy week. So don't give up entirely on them. And, obviously I would keep, if I had Silverberg on my team and another guy who wasn't going to play at all for me next week, I might still take the 2 games out of Silverberg, but it's probably comparable to the Chicago players we talked about earlier in the show.
Right, yeah, that makes sense. And I guess at some point we have to start getting concerned about Troy Terry. But Getzlaff just returned, so let's see if they can get their magic together. Maybe in a couple of weeks we could bring them up and finally decide what we're going to do with these guys. And yeah, it's a good point though, Brian. Like a 5-game week like seems so appealing when you look at the games you're going to get, but these are humans. They might get tired, and so you're not, the 5th game of the week may not be as valuable as like the 2nd game from another team. So I guess you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so we're on goalies here. The Gibson goalie injury was discussed, but we do have some goalie outjuries. We actually have 3 interesting goalie outjuries to me, either recent or on the horizon. And I think all 3 of these guys we need to dig into if they have a chance to steal their starting jobs or at least get a lot of games. I'm talking about Petr Mrazek, Chris Driedger, and Pavel Francouz. So starting with Mrazek, he was the goalie for the Leafs yesterday. He let in 4 goals on 35 shots in the win over Chicago. My brother and I were talking about Mrazek. Joel, hey buddy. So he was saying that he thinks that Sheldon Keefe is not going to want to burn out Jack Campbell. So like even if Campbell's better, maybe Mrazek still gets a decent number of games just, to keep Campbell fresh. And the Leafs clearly, they showed yesterday, right? They're good enough that even if Mrazek doesn't have an amazing game, they can still win regardless because they have Austin Matthews, right? So Mrazek is out there as someone that we need to consider adding. Then we have Chris Driedger, who's been taken off the IR for Seattle. He hasn't played a game yet, but you look at Philip Grubauer, he had those couple good games near the end of November where we were saying, oh, maybe now like Grubauer after a slow start to the year, maybe finally he's like on track. But no, he's been bad again lately. He's let in 3+ goals in each of his last 6 starts. So that's opened up the door for Driedger to potentially claim the job. Of course, he has to play well. He has to be up to the task. But I think that if Driedger plays well in his next game, why wouldn't Seattle play him again for the following game, considering that Grubauer's been bad? So I think that might be a fun player to take a swing on, though people who have done that, the last time Driedger played, didn't go so well, or maybe it was like a couple games ago, but like, he might also just be bad. Then you go to Pavel Francouz, who's been on a conditioning stint in the AHL for Colorado's minor league team, and he's put up 3 straight wins and a .945 save percentage in those games. He's now been called up. Colorado is playing today, and Francouz is backing up Darcy Kemper, and Darcy Kemper has been kind of having a Robin Lehner-ish season, right? Like he hasn't been terrible, but he's not up to the level that a lot of people were hoping from him when they drafted him. So you've got to imagine that if Francouz can play well, then he could at least eat in and get close to a 50-50. So Brian, of these 3 goalies that I just brought up, Mrazek, Driedger, and Kemper, which of these 3 do you think has the best chance of getting like the most starts moving forward? And I guess also combined with like being useful to you, or maybe putting it in an easier way, how would you rank them in terms of who you'd want to have on your fantasy team?
Yeah, so let's take a quick tour of what each guy might offer, starting with Petr Mrazek, who I think puts a dent in Jack Campbell's workload, albeit not a huge one, I would assume. Campbell started 14 of the last 19 Leafs games leading up to Mrazek's return on Saturday night. And that means he's been starting Jack Campbell about 3 of every 4 games. I could see that becoming 2 of every 3 games, even if Petr Mrazek does struggle out of the gate. It to me, what I've seen in Toronto, I feel like they like to have both their goalies going and can afford to allow their goalies to play and have bad nights here and there because the offense can make up for it more often than not. So I think that Mrazek is interesting outside of a streamer, but I do think that this is more a flag. Mrazek's return is more a flag for Campbell managers because in volume leagues, I think this makes Jack Campbell a guy you can't lean on the same way you've been able to for the last 6 weeks or so. So take a peek at your lineup and see how you might be able to reclaim some of that lost value that you're not going to see quite as much action from Jack Campbell. Maybe you can't keep waiting, for example, on that skater you believe in to finally produce, and you need to make better use or maximize the rest of your roster because Jack Campbell can't carry the same load he's been carrying for you for the last little while. So there's one takeaway from Mrazek's return, and it's not about Mrazek's fantasy value. It's about Campbell's being lower. Of course, there's a chance Mrazek could work his way into towards a timeshare, and Jack Campbell isn't the most durable goalie either. But beyond a speculative ad, I don't see any immediate substantial value from Petr Mrazek. For Grubauer, it's really interesting.
Brian, I guess you can't see when I put my hand up. But, can I just jump in quickly?
Yeah.
Yeah, though I guess, Brian, on the other hand, you could say, you're saying it's possible Mrazek, comes in and ends up becoming a tandem guy or whatever. Sure, that's possible. But on the other side, it's also possible that Mrazek, just isn't good. And then the Leafs just have to continue playing Campbell like they have been with whoever their backup's been. Wall, I think, Joseph Wall, or I think Hutchinson got in there like he always does every once in a while. Yeah. But I personally don't have that much faith in Mrazek. I do agree with you that probably Campbell will play a little bit less because that's why they signed Mrazek in the first place. But at the same time, I don't know. Campbell's just been really good, and Mrazek still hasn't impressed me. But yeah, I agree with your take. I just wanted to say that it's possible.
Yeah, and you say it's possible Mrazek isn't that good, but Toronto signing him to a 3-year, $4 million contract says that I think they think otherwise.
Yeah.
Right? So they might keep putting him in, even if he struggles, to show that he can do the thing. It's of course possible that he can't. Speaking of someone being paid and not doing the thing, Philip Grubauer over in Seattle is exactly that. So Driedger's off injured reserve now, and we saw Driedger fail to take advantage of an open door before he got injured. And it's the same story now as it was then, right? The Kraken are probably pretty invested in making Grubauer work. Just a bad situation for both goalies, though, in Seattle. I really am surprised that we're almost at the 30-game mark, and neither Grubauer nor Driedger, despite playing for a good defensive team, has been able to earn any kind of faith from me or really anybody that they're going to put in serviceable performances on a regular basis. The only thing is that if Driedger can put 1 or 2 or 3 good starts together, that could be a real boon for his fantasy value, but that's a huge if based on what we've seen from Driedger so far this year. I guess the other takeaway is that Grubauer's leaving the door open, right? There's nobody else to start for him over these last few games when Driedger's been out. And Grubauer has been given every chance to take the job and run and hasn't. And then looking at Francouz, the bottom line on him is we still don't know who this guy is, really, right? But the door seems open for Francouz too, the way that Kemper has played. And Kemper is looking back to his Minnesota Wild self, unfortunately, amongst high-volume goalies. Kemper ranks ahead of only Philip Grubauer in Delta Fenwick save percentage, which means he is underplaying his expected save percentage by more than any other goalie in the league aside from Philip Grubauer. So Kemper putting up these really poor numbers at 5-on-5, which means there's an opportunity for Francouz. And Kemper, by the way, also looked bad last year at 5-on-5, and so did Grubauer to a lesser extent. So let's see. Francouz, like I said, I keep saying this door is open for him because Kemper only has a 47% quality start percentage too. There's lots of reasons to think that Francouz, if he can do something, like the same way you said about Driedger, if he can step in and perform, why wouldn't the team roll with him, except for the fact that they're more invested in the guy and the incumbent goalie who is struggling? So I think we'll just have to wait and see because Francouz has never looked awesome himself in his own expected save percentage numbers. So with that little rundown, I'm just reading your note to me, Elon. Thank you. Yeah, I wrote Grew, but I think I would rank these goalies. I think I'd put Driedger out in front, and then Francouz, and then Mrazek. I could be convinced to put Francouz in front of Driedger. I just think if I'm looking at which guy between those two is the better goalie, I think they both have good opportunities to take a job. I just lean a little bit more to Driedger actually being the one who's able to take advantage of the opportunity he has more than Francouz. But it really is a coin flip between them, with Mrazek running third.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. It's really hard to pick between them. It's just they both have an opportunity. Now we have to see what they do. Don't forget also, like, yeah, Kemper hasn't been amazing, but like it's not as if he's like lost Colorado games. Like they're still doing just fine. So like there's no reason for them not to keep playing him if he's just doing fine, as opposed to Grubauer, who's been like pretty bad, right? So it's like they need a goalie to come in and take over for him if they can. So I guess we'll have to see what happens there. By the way, one goalie who unfortunately won't be coming back is Ben Bishop, who had like, this is so sad, right? He like has had this knee injury forever. He's been rehabbing and he's been at all the practices. He finally went to the AHL. Like I think Ben and Lewis talked about it on Tuesday, how like Bishop was going to go to the minors. We were talking about how this is going to be a conditioning stint and then discussing what's going to be the implication for Dallas. He went down. He had one bad game. I guess he didn't feel good in his knee and he decided to call it quits. That's it. It's like career's over. So, you know, great career, Ben Bishop. Sad ending, but obviously let's remember the good times for Bishop. That obviously makes the situation in Dallas a little bit more straightforward, right? I'd imagine things will just continue to go how they have been now, right? They've basically been going with Holtby and Ettinger, and then Hudobin basically never plays. So I think this is probably good news for Ettinger, who likely gets to keep his job on the team. I'm not sure why they would send him down now if they've kept him up all this time. Though, like, that job that Ettinger has may just be a backup to Braden Holtby, right? Because Holtby's been really good lately. He's been getting the majority of the starts for the Stars. So, Brian, we just ranked Driedger, then Francouz, and then Mrazek. Where would Ettinger fit in that ranking right now? Like, if people have Ettinger, should they be thinking of just dropping him for one of those other three? I guess Driedger, since you have him at the top of your list.
First off, shout out to Ben Bishop. Like, what a bummer for him to like try. Remember preseason? It's like Ben's going to give it a go. He's going to play. He wasn't ready yet. And now we just see exactly what was all going on behind the scenes, which was Ben Bishop was just like trying to take his last chance, even though he was maybe he knew he was never going to be fully comfortable in seeing if he could hack it. So a great career for Ben Bishop. Sad way for it to end, because I think he had a few more good years in him. He's been one of the best goalies in the NHL over the last few seasons. So a real bummer of an end of a career for Ben Bishop. But kudos to him for what he did put together. Now we flip to the Dallas Stars, who have 3 goalies instead of 4, which is still too many. You know, the funny part is about this Ettinger thing. Remember last week on the show when you mentioned how Rick Bowness had said Holtby's going to get 2 and Ettinger's going to get 2. And we're like, at least we know that. We don't know which games, but at least we know that. And then Holtby started 3 and Ettinger started 1, even though Ettinger played so good in his 1 start. Come on. What are we supposed to do with this information? It's hard enough to figure out what's going on in Dallas without the coach changing plans midweek, which we also said could very well happen. Anyway, my gut says that if Dallas sees Holtby holding the fort, they send Ettinger back down to the AHL where he can stay sharp, see action, get Hudobin out of the press box. I think Ettinger has the advantage of Holtby compared to the other guys, of Holtby potentially falling into the form we've seen from him most often in recent years, which is bad. And I think Ettinger is actually the best goalie between Driedger, Francouz, and Mrazek. I think I'd have him between Mrazek and the other 2, Driedger and Francouz, who I didn't really want to separate in the order I gave them. You know, Dallas right now is in this in-between state of whether to go for it again with the core they have or blow it up. And I imagine what they see in the next 10 games may impact their direction and also how they use Ettinger. Right now, I'm not optimistic that he's going to see a ton of time in the near future. So I see him just as a stream for now. But if you're in a league where goaltending is scarce and you can afford a roster spot on a speculative guy, I'd be interested to see what Ettinger's workload is like over the next couple of weeks, because out of Driedger, Francouz, and Mrazek, I think Ettinger definitely has the greatest upside. I just don't think he has a much greater chance of realizing it than any of those other 3.
Yeah, the thing is that Driedger and Francouz are behind goalies that have been struggling. Braden Holtby has been really good. Like, I think I do read the situation a little differently than you. I don't see why now they're going to change. Like, they've had Hudobin in the press box and they seem to be fine with it, and Dallas is doing well. So why not just keep that as a situation, keep Ettinger as the backup? That's my impression of what's going to happen. But either way, I don't disagree with you that as a backup to Braden Holtby, who's doing well, and maybe it's just a situation where the Dallas goalie generally does well because of the system. Regardless, it's just like I'm not that interested in Ettinger because I think Holtby is the starter at this point. But of course, anything could change with goalies, right? A couple bad starts from one guy, and all of a sudden everything gets flipped on its head. Okay, two more goalies, Brian, and then we'll go to the other positions. But I wanted to bring up two starters, or at least for now, starters on teams that we didn't expect them to be able to succeed. But this past week has been pretty good for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen on Buffalo and Anton Forsberg on the Sens. So first in Buffalo, UPL has had a great start to his season. He led in only 2 goals in each of the 3 games he played for the Sabres this week. Unfortunately, he lost all 3 games, but hey, that's not on him. He's letting in only 2 goals. That's good. He stopped 40 of 42 in the shootout loss to Washington on the second half of a back-to-back on Saturday. That's super impressive. He played 2 games in a row, and even Ovi couldn't score on him. And I see that Ovi had a ton of shot attempts, and yeah, just couldn't get anything past Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Then on the Sens side, while many were expecting Philip Gustafsson to be the beneficiary of Matt Murray being sent down, and by the way, side note, Matt Murray's injured again. Like, this guy, I could see him being like a Ben Bishop and just never playing the NHL again. That's just a hunch I have. But regardless, we're not talking about Matt Murray. We thought it was going to be Gustafsson that's going to take over, but no, it's been Anton Forsberg, who seems to be running away with the starter's job. He's had 3 quality starts in his last 4, including an incredible 25-save shutout over the Lightning yesterday. Anyone who bet on the Sens to win that game by a shutout probably won a lot of money. I can't even imagine what those odds would have been. So, Brian, do either of these 2 goalies, Forsberg or Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, strike you as someone that you would consider grabbing out of free agency now that potentially is going to be like a decent starter for you for the rest of the season? Like, this is above the level of like the last 3 we talked about. These 2 goalies potentially could be starters. It's usually hard to find a starter, but here and this isn't Stoli the goalie who's just a starter until Gibson comes back. UPL and Anton Forsberg might just be their team starters. And also, I will say with Ottawa, I know they've been really bad this year, but it really seemed like, I don't know, maybe I'm going to buy too much into this game over Tampa, but like it's, they haven't had many games with that top line all healthy, Tkachuk, Norris, and Batherson. When the 3 of them are healthy and going like they were against Tampa, like they look a lot better. Like, you're a better team when you have a really good top line. And so I wonder if maybe Ottawa's a little better than we've seen so far, which would obviously be good for their starter.
Yes, it would be. I want to start by talking about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, though, in Buffalo. I liked last week taking a chance on Luukkonen, and I still like doing that this week. Buffalo seems, you might be optimistic about Ottawa, but Buffalo seems more stable on the back end than Ottawa, who just waived Michael Del Zotto after signing him to what was like a 3-year contract worth almost $5 million. I'm like, okay, we told you to play top 4, but we're actually just going to send you down to the minors, because I think what Ottawa is doing right now is saying, like, this season's a goner. They said at the start of the year that this was their entry year into actual contention. That hasn't happened. A lot has gone wrong for several reasons. And now I think they see the value in tanking for Shane Wright. So I don't see Ottawa as nice as it would be to be optimistic about them. And I think they could still surprise even with a young group, because they do have a bunch of good players who do deserve at least a look in the NHL to see where they're at in their development curves. Buffalo seems the more stable team, and I like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen for that reason. He performed well this last week. That's great. I wonder if he could still do it. But as I said on last week's show, Buffalo presents a decent environment for a goalie to come in and be good. Not great necessarily, because there's not a lot of run support, but there's enough there that they can support a goalie who can come in and be a half-decent player. And I'm hoping that's what Luukkonen can be for Forsberg in Ottawa. Regardless of team performance, I don't even think Forsberg should be expected to hold up for so long. We've seen him go on these little runs before. They never last. And we know that the coach in Ottawa, DJ Smith, is a guy with not a lot of patience too. And Philip Gustafsson is right there. Meanwhile, like you said, Elon, Buffalo has no other options. It's Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen or bust right now. So I like UPL as a shot if you want to get a rest of season starter, more than any of the guys we've discussed so far on the show, and more than Anton Forsberg.
Okay, fair enough. How could I disagree with that great logic that you've presented for, yeah, the situation in Ottawa? You're right. Like, yeah, Forsberg has been good this week, but we talked about just like a few weeks ago how Gustafsson was looking really good, so things could change really quickly. All right, let's switch from goalies now. Let's go to defense, okay? I've got 4 hot streak defensemen to throw at you. I'd be curious to get your takes, maybe even ask you to do another ranking, which I know you love so much. So I'm going to start in Calgary. These are 4 defensemen who are on hot streaks, likely available in a lot of leagues, and like doing really well and maybe shouldn't be available, right? So, okay, I'm going to start in Calgary. Rasmus Anderson has been the power play 1 quarterback like all season, hasn't done well enough to keep him out of free agency in most leagues. Like, he's been in free agency in both of my serious leagues, like basically all throughout the season. But I think that I missed the boat here because he's been taken in both of them, and maybe I should have been the one to grab Rasmus Anderson. He's been heating up lately. He had 2 assists on Saturday versus Boston, which brought him up to 4 points in his last 4 games. He's also been contributing some per riffs. Like, he had a couple of games with 4 blocks, and then in that last game he had 0 blocks but the 2 assists. In the game before those 2 games with 4 blocks, he had 4 shots. So basically, you're not going to get everything, but it seems like every game you get of Rasmus Anderson, he's either going to give you multiple of something, be it assists, be it blocks, be it shots. If he puts it all together, what a great game that would be. But yeah, so he's been really good. Then Brian, maybe I'll just say all 4 of these defensemen, and then you could just like kind of give me your responses to them. Okay, he's nodding, by the way, for the people listening to the audio. So he's in agreement. So then in Detroit, we've got Philip Hronek, who has, of course, rightfully taken a backseat to Moritz Seider, who continues to put up what I think will be a Calder-level season. Seider has 5 points in his last 5 games. I'm definitely not going to take anything away from Seider. But Hronek's also been good, right? He's been low-key producing from the shadows. His 1 goal, 1 assist game versus Colorado on Friday brought him to 6 points in his previous 8 games. He's just been, like, super solid. Like, ever since he was healthy scratched earlier in the year, which, Ryan, like, don't get mad at me because I know you hate it. Like, I wonder if it helped. Like, I don't know what it is, but, like, he got healthy scratched and now he's back. I know you're going to say probably it's more a matter of he was good the whole time and they shouldn't have ever scratched him.
No, I'm actually with you here on Philip Hronek. A switch did seem to flip from pre-scratch to post-scratch. And I'm not, like, you know, a player doesn't reinvent themselves because of a healthy scratch, but maybe it was the right motivational tool at the right time.
Yeah. Okay, anyway, so yeah, Hronek now, 15 points in 26 games. That's a 47-point pace, which would crush his career high. Still wouldn't be anywhere close to Seider, but pretty good, right? Okay. Then on the Islanders, another team where the top power play quarterback has probably been available in your free agency this whole season, Noah Dobson, but now he's someone that you might want to consider adding because he's got goals in 3 of his last 4 games, including on Saturday versus New Jersey, where he scored a power play goal. So Ryan Pulock is out, right? So the Islanders are finally seeming to run like a normal top power play that gets most of the time, like none of this like 50-50 stuff. They've been going Barzal, Lee, Palmieri, Wallstrom, and Dobson, and like they're seeing like 70+% of the PPTOI most nights. So Dobson's doing well. He's getting more power play time. Okay, and then I've still got one more defenseman, but why don't we start with these 3 actually? So Hronek, Rasmus Anderson, Noah Dobson. Do you think what we're seeing lately is for real? Give us your analysis, give us a ranking, give us the good old-fashioned Brian Calm rundown on these 3 defensemen.
Old-fashioned. I mean, okay, sure.
But what we've grown to know and love.
Yeah, exactly. So Rasmus Anderson has given us these little glimpses of hope before, but I don't think they're even glimpses of hope. I think it's like, I'm just going to spoil my answer right away. This is just like a little blip, a little hot run for Rasmus Anderson, as far as I can tell. And in his last 2 seasons, which he spent largely in the top power play role, playing similar minutes to what he's playing now, like over 20 minutes a night, Rasmus Anderson has 36 points in 84 games. That's less than half a point per game. He's averaged fewer than 2 shots per game, less than a hit per game, and less than or about a 1.5 blocks per game. That said, I will say the one difference I am seeing in Anderson lately came after he put up those points, which is that he played 2 straight nights, seeing 25 minutes or more of time on ice. And I think, Elon, it's good. Like, it's good that you have your eye on him and you're seeing if anything's changed. Like, if that's worth a speculative ad in your deep enough league, okay, you're desperate for defense and you're wondering if Anderson is becoming some kind of different player. Great. I just need more, right? Until he does this for a few weeks, I'm going to assume him to be who he's always been, but that's the rub, right? It's up to you whether you're going to wait a few weeks and then he'll be gone, or you take a chance on him now. And that all depends on your desperation level and management style. With 4 moves a week in the cupful, I'm probably not racing out to add him when I already have 4 defensemen plus 1 on IR that I'm feeling pretty happy with. But if you want to, go ahead and fill your boots. He's the one I'd like the least of this group.
Fair enough. Okay, so Rasmus Anderson. Well, I will say, Calgary does play Monday, Tuesday next week. There's only one game on Monday. It's Calgary versus Chicago.
Right.
So
if you can add him for free for that game and give him the 1 game tryout, and hey, if he gets me a point or if he makes some contribution, I'll hold him again.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
go
but
for
fine.
it.
He's the bottom. Okay, so then we're down to Dobson or Hronek.
Yeah, so for Hronek, he's on this, like you say, this is a very quiet 47-point pace. That's 10 points above his previous career best. Last year, Hronek actually deserved better than the 38 points or so that he paced for. But it would be easy to assume Hronek didn't deserve better because he's Philip Hronek and hasn't ever done better, and he's on Detroit. But looking at his on-ice shooting percentage last year, Detroit shot less than 5% when Hronek was on the ice. And that's like at least about 3% worse than Detroit should have. So Hronek was the victim of some bad variance last season. Probably should have paced for over 40 points, but we didn't get to see that. And this year, the on-ice picture is actually really good. And it's more, we're seeing in his 47-point pace, Hronek is doing better than just having like bad luck regressing to normal. This season, while Hronek is on the ice, the Wings are much better this year than they were last year. They're seeing another half an expected goal per 60 minutes, and they're seeing another actual goal per 60 minutes with Hronek on the ice. Last year was brutal. Basically, the Red Wings were scoring 1 goal per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 while Hronek is on the ice. Do the math. Assume that Hronek plays fewer than 20 minutes a night. That's less than 1 goal every 3 games while Hronek is on the ice in Detroit. And of course, he's not going to put up points in that situation, but it's nice to see Detroit doing better with Hronek on the ice this year and Hronek not falling victim to this unfortunate variant. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing from Hronek, and I think he could keep it up. And then Dobson, this is a classic Dabrowski, a good old-fashioned Dabrowski catch, seeing that Dobson is getting more power play time with Pulock out. Pulock's back in like 1 to 3 weeks, I guess. So until then, sure, yeah, you can get into Noah Dobson, and I'd like him over Rasmus Anderson, but I don't think quite as much as Philip Hronek. The upside might be better, but the consistency just hasn't been there. It's funny that Dobson's on our radars now because he's scoring goals. Like that's his recent production. 3 goals for Dobson on his last 14 shots, which have come over just 4 games. That's an improvement in Dobson's shot volume. He averaged 1.5 shots per game last year, and here he is averaging more than 3 shots per game over his last 4. So if Dobson can keep up that shot volume, that's really lovely to see. But he has been quarterbacking like a 70% timeshare power play unit without putting up 3 shots per game. So that's what I'm watching for Dobson. Also, some assists would be nice because he's not going to score on 3 of every 14 shots that he takes. So yeah, I would try Dobson if I'm looking short term of this group. I'd look at Hronek if I'm looking medium or long term, and then Anderson, Rasmus Anderson's like your Hail Mary of the group.
I feel like with Rasmus Anderson, he's kind of just like, I think he's like solid enough like that he's always going to be on that top power play, but like we've seen, like maybe he doesn't have the high highs that the other two
doesn't do anything
possess.
there.
Yeah, well, lately he's because also Calgary's a good team. I guess it's just a matter of like a lot of power play goals go in, and he's not a part of them. But lately, anyway, yeah, no, I don't disagree. Actually, we have a surprise entry. Oh my God, it's Evan Bouchard's music. So Adam is here in the chat, and he's saying that he wants us to also add Evan Bouchard in this chat because so you had Hronek there as maybe the guy you like the best of the group, and there's a good comparison here because Evan Bouchard, just like Hronek, currently on a 47-point pace. Though while Hronek is heating up, Bouchard has been cooling off. Bouchard, and actually all the Oilers are a little cold lately, but Bouchard had no points in his last 4 games. Since Darnell Nurse has come back, Bouchard's power play time has gone down. He was getting some second power play every once in a while. Now it's just basically none. So yeah, Brian, if you had to compare Bouchard to say a Hronek or a Dobson, as Adam is saying, both of them are available to him. Does he drop Bouchard for one of these guys at this point? My instinct is to say, yeah, drop Bouchard because I don't love like a non-power play guy. I know that he gets exposure to McDavid and like he's a good defenseman. He's getting decent ice time, but I don't know. I prefer more of like a go-to guy, and to me that means power play. Like it's pretty rare for a non-power play defenseman to be worth it for offense in fantasy. Maybe he's an exception, but yeah, that's my pick. What do you think?
Sure, you're right that it's pretty rare, but Evan Bouchard, like almost all of his production, and he's pacing for 47 points, has come at 5-on-5. He's been doing this without power play production, and it looks like, yeah, he's probably overperforming a little bit at 5-on-5, but I could see like a 40 to 45 point pace coming from him. So would I drop Evan Bouchard for Filip Hronek? I don't think so. Would I drop him for Noah Dobson? Or sorry, so would I drop Evan Bouchard for Filip Hronek? I think so. I think I'd also drop him for Noah Dobson in the short term, knowing that you're losing out on Evan Bouchard, who's decent, at least putting a couple shots on net per game and a 40-point pace. Like that's nothing to sneeze at. But Dobson's short term outlook seems better while he is quarterbacking the no doubt top power play unit in Long Island, even though he's not doing anything with it so far. I think Bouchard is probably right in the ballpark of these other guys. So I actually might let schedule decide a bunch of it, but I wouldn't drop Bouchard for Rasmus Anderson. And I know this is crazy, but I know how much you like. He's on Calgary. Calgary's good. He's on the top power play. That's really good. But he's been in this situation, like I said, for over 80 games and has not managed even a half point per game in that spot. So like maybe you can be optimistic and hope his luck is turning. And you know me, I'll wait and see.
Yeah, that's fair. So, Adam, hopefully that helped and let us know what you decide. Okay, so Brian, since we're on the Islanders, we're talking about Dobson. I do want to mention a couple other guys here. I've got to put a spotlight on Matt Barzal, who's been incredible lately. 9 points in his last 6 games. Remember, he went pointless in 5 before that. People were talking about if they should maybe drop him in shallower leagues, and we talked about him on the show and said maybe that upside is a bit capped because he's on the Islanders. But, like, look, he's clearly an amazing player. I'd love to imagine what he'd be able to do. Like, let's say Boston had drafted him. Well, actually, I guess that's a hard example because like he wouldn't have taken over Bergeron's job. Let's say he was on Boston and Bergeron wasn't there. Like let's say next year Bergeron retires and Barzal's there centering Marchand and Pasternak. I feel like Barzal would be like maybe like in the contention as like a top scorer in the league. Like I really feel like he's such a good player. But yeah, he's clearly capped. Nice to see him breaking out right now. But hey, while Barzal is likely not available in anyone's leagues, one guy that is available and also on a similar hot streak is Oliver Wahlstrom, who is only 10% rostered on Yahoo, currently on a run of 8 points in his last 5 games. And he's had multi-point games in 4 of his last 5, including 2 assists versus New Jersey on Saturday. 4 of those 8 points in the last 5 games have come from that now stacked top power play that gets all the power play time. Of course, on the downside, Wallstrom's barely getting even strength time from his line with Peugeot and Parise, but he's still getting points. Like even strength, he's got 4 points at even strength in his last 5 games. So, Brian, do you think this run from Wallstrom, is it all for real? Like, I recall having high hopes for him going into the season. A lot of us thought maybe he'd be the one to get the spot on line 1 with Lee and Barzal at some point. That hasn't happened, but it is nice to see him on the top power play. He's a high pedigree guy. I don't know if Trotz likes him, which is obviously a big point against him. But yeah, what's your current take on Wallstrom and how excited would you be to grab him if he was available for you?
I would not be so excited to grab Oliver Wahlstrom, but it's not a knock on Wahlstrom. It's a knock on his situation, which has improved lately, at least. The Islanders have had such a freaking hard time scoring goals this season. In their first 20 games of the year, the Isles scored 3 or more goals on just 5 occasions. That's 15 out of their first 20 games. The Isles scored 2 goals or less. That added up to 38 goals for the Islanders in their first 20 games, which is fewer than 2 goals per game, which is just gross. And now the Isles have scored 5 goals, 4 goals, and 3 goals in their last 3 games. And we're seeing points show up on their players because of that, finally, including Dobson and including Wahlstrom. One of the reasons that the Isles haven't been scoring goals is because they have the 7th worst shooting percentage in the league at 5-on-5, and their offense doesn't deserve to be quite that bad. So it's nice to see some of these guys finally look rosterable. And Wahlstrom himself was DUE, to borrow from Dave Betton in the Stream Scheme, which you should listen to. The link is in our show notes. Wahlstrom was DUE for some better production, but now he's at a 46-point pace, and that looks about proper. I mean, the thing is that you can't be a high-octane scorer in Long Island unless you're Matt Barzal. That's it. I used to think Anders Lee could join Barzal there. No, I knew Jordan Eberle couldn't, but he could at least like get into like the 50-55 point range. And I'm not sure anybody else can. We were talking, there was someone asking on our patrons only Discord server about acquiring Wahlstrom in a dynasty league or trading him away, one or the other. But my take was that so long as Wallstrom's an Islander, and so long as the Islanders are under Barry Trotz, and so long as Barry Trotz has chosen this system to play, I don't think like Oliver Wahlstrom might be amazing and super offensively gifted and talented, but the ceiling is so low playing as an Islander, and that's why I'm not rushing out to add him. It does make him a little more streamable, like add him to the pile of, Pajot and Beauvillier and maybe Palmieri, but that's about as far as I'm willing to go with my interest in Wallstrom.
Yeah, I'll go a little higher and say higher than Palmieri, not maybe, but I agree with you aside from that
Okay,
it's like
I'm
not too
I'm with
exciting.
you there. Yeah.
Okay. By the way, it looks like Troy Terry and Ryan Getzlaff heard my ominous warning that if they don't heat up, we might have to talk about them in a couple weeks. Troy Terry just scored a goal, assisted by a Fowler and Getzlaff. So there you go. You're back on the squad, guys. Okay. So Brian, for the listeners with a keen ear, I did say that I was going to talk about 4 defensemen. So that's been 3. But number 4, actually, he deserves to be discussed on his own because he's number 1 in our hearts. It's our Bay, Erik Karlsson, who continues his amazing bounce back season. His goal yesterday versus Dallas extended his streak to 10 points in his last 10 games. Brian, I want to thank my tier 1 competitor Mika for waking Karlsson up. He sent me a buy low offer on Karlsson right before this stretch when he went quiet for a week, and I think Karlsson saw that, was like, dude, I'm not gonna like embarrass myself in like the league named after me. And so here he goes. He's doing great. Karlsson's now up to 18 points in 22 games on the season. That's a 67-point pace. But I don't even want to ask you if he can keep up this pace, because I prefer to just revel in his greatness. So please don't say that Karlsson can't keep this up. Just revel with me if you'd like.
Okay. So you don't want me to tell you if I think this can continue? You just want me to be happy for Erik Karlsson?
And I want you to say that it will for sure continue.
Okay. It will for sure continue. Elon, can you just plug your ears for a minute?
I'll just go check the chat here.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, Erik Karlsson has this like great 5-on-5 bounce back, thanks in part to him scoring 6 times on 43 shots at 5-on-5. That's a 14% conversion rate versus his usual 5 to 7% conversion rate. But that's really it. That's all I'm gonna say about why this current almost 70-point pace is not sustainable for Erik Karlsson. He's just scoring a few more goals than he should, but it is nice to see under the hood things have gotten better. Because remember, Karlsson came to San Jose, had one really awesome 70-point season, then 2 in the tank, and now we're in season number 4 in San Jose, and we're seeing Karlsson's shot rates pop back up to the way they looked in his debut Shark season, where he paced for 70 points. Same with his on-ice expected goals numbers, so things are going better for Karlsson himself and for the Sharks when Karlsson is on the ice. Everything looks decent for Karlsson, and I think that's a step up from the last couple years. Not as good as his heyday, but definitely better than those last 2 years that have been really sad for Erik Karlsson and anyone who wants to believe in him. Talking about no one in particular, I could see Karlsson probably pacing for 50 to 55 points. I think that's a reasonable range of expectation. Elon, you're not supposed to be listening. He's currently pacing for nearly 70 points. And if that's a sell high opportunity for you, I suggest you explore it before, the shots don't keep going in 14% of the time. Because I think 50 to 55 points is where I would bet on Karlsson landing for point pace rest of the season.
I don't know. I think if the shot doesn't go in, then someone will score on the rebound and he'll get the assist. He's that good, Brian.
Okay, awesome.
And then like another player if that doesn't happen, then a player on the other team will pick up the puck and try to do a clear out pass, but Karlsson's going to intercept it, pass it to someone, goal. There you go. So that's what I think is going to happen. So we'll just have to agree to disagree here.
I'm glad I did all that research.
Well, it doesn't matter. He's Erik Karlsson. He's better than your research. But okay, I guess I will ask you for your opinion on some other Sharks and actually listen to what you say. Because there's a couple other guys on hot streaks right now. Tomas Hertl was cold for a while, but now he's on a huge roll. He has goals in 4 straight, including a hat trick versus Calgary. So he's just, again, a Timmy's gold mine if you want to pick him and get yourself a goal and eventually a free coffee. Like I won, by the way. I won 7 days in a row of free coffee. We need to contact Tim Hortons, by the way. We talk about them all the time in our Discord with this little promotion they have, and they don't pay us anything. I'll be honest, I don't even like the coffee that much. I've been going to get the coffees just because I won them and I wanted to
now they're for sure not going to pay us anything.
Well, maybe I haven't given them a fair shot.
Maybe we can Yelp them. It's we'll say a bunch of negative stuff on the show, and then we'll say, hey, if you want to partner up with us, we won't release that portion.
Oh, that's a good point. Here's the thing. So I'm not like a coffee snob, but I have coffee I like at my house, and I have a lot of it. So it's like, why am I going out to get this coffee that? Anyway, whatever.
Why
No one's
leave
claiming.
my home ever?
If I'm gonna leave my home, I'm gonna go to a fancier coffee shop, unless I've earned free coffee by predicting NHL goals. What was I talking about here? Tomas Hertl has been scoring a lot of goals. Timo Meier also scoring a lot of goals, getting a lot of points. His 2 assists versus Dallas brought him to 28 points in 23 games on the season. What? Are we going to see like 100 points from Timo Meier? Like, probably not, but this is just an insane year. And I've got to imagine if he doesn't hit 100, he's going to hit 80, even just with the big head start that he's had so far, unless you say that he's like extremely overperforming. And so then, like, when you look at Hertl and Meier doing so well, you, of course, in a deeper league, want to look at who they've been playing with. And it's former Toronto Maple Leaf Alex Barabanov, who's been getting in on the fun. He has 2 assists, getting in on the fun. He had 2 assists on Saturday in that game where I said that Hertl scored. He has 5 assists in his last 4 games now. So, Brian, we talked about Nino Niederreiter, Andre Kasha, Wallstrom, all getting in on the fun of, like, maybe the other better players who are carrying the play. How interested are you in Barabanov compared to those guys while he's on this line with Hertl and Meier?
That line is doing amazing things. I have one league where I have Hertl and Meier. I'm loving it. I'm having such a great time. I don't have Barabanov because it's not that deep a league. I think it's really like, this is like it almost reminds me of a Robert Thomas situation, because Barabanov does so little of anything else, right? He's averaging 1 shot per game, although his shot counts have been better lately. They're still not great. And it's a lot of assists because he doesn't take a lot of shots. And most often he's not doing a whole lot for you anywhere else on the score sheet. So like, if you have the patience for someone like a Robert Thomas, then you can go ahead and grab Alex Barabanov. If we're comparing him to, okay, the guys at the top of the show, we had Kasha and Nino Niederreiter, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so I would have Barabanov at the bottom of that group. That doesn't mean he's not worthwhile, but I think he could be worth a stream, especially if he's gonna add a games played or 2 to your roster. But he's not. I don't feel like I need to go out and get him the same way that I feel like I need to go out and get Kasha or Niederreiter.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Maybe a more fair comparison is like fellow top sixer in San Jose, Jonathan Dahlen, who was quiet on Saturday, but went on a stretch of 5 points in 5 games before that. So it's fun to have a couple of lower end Sharks players we thought were lower end. Dahlen's having like a decent rookie season, right? Like, he's not going to win the Calder because there's been other people outshining him, but he's been really good. Like, if anything, you could say like someone who the Sharks desperately needed, right? Because they've had this like good core of players. We talked about like Karlsson, Burns, Couture, Hertl, like Meier now, like, like they have, but they've just had such a dearth of depth options, and now they're getting these players who are really helping. And so yeah, Dahlen versus Barabanov. Let's say, I don't know why someone even has to grab a Shark. It's not like they have a great schedule next week, but how would you compare those two?
I think I'd go Barabanov just because of his current deployment. But both of these guys, they feel like, they feel like Ottawa Senators to me. And Jonathan Dahlen was a Sens draft pick, of course. I'll squeeze that in there. But they feel like the depth Sens, in that, like, if you see Ottawa has some extra games, you might go out and get Connor Brown or Tyler Ennis or Nick Paul or Chris Tierney. I feel like Dahlen and Barabanov are probably about as likely to deliver for you, maybe a little bit more. I don't want to discount them, but it just feels like I have about that level of excitement and interest in them, especially as like long-term options.
Right. Yeah, so I respect you a lot, but I respectfully disagree about this. I like them
more.
Yeah. A lot more, right? Like, they're playing on these great lines
fair.
And producing. Yeah,
I think you're right. I was probably a little low because
you just want to get in your requisite Sens talk. We didn't talk enough with Forsberg. You wanted to get in also Connor Brown and Tyler Ennis.
I guess so. Yeah, my comparison was all those guys who don't play on a meaningful scoring line, which is not true about Barabanov. So yeah, thank you for calling me out on that, so I can quickly correct.
Okay, it's not a call out, just a fair disagreement among friends. Yeah, and Dahlen's playing with Couture, right, who's also having a good year. So the top 6 in San Jose is a good place to be so far this year, unlike maybe some previous years. Okay, let's do a sad hot streak now, which normally isn't the case. But unfortunately, I wanted to go into this episode talking about Blake Wheeler and how great he's been for anyone who held on. Because, we talked about him on the show a bunch of times. Everyone was wondering if they can drop him. Basically, from what I recall on the show, we were kind of saying, yeah, we get it. And he's like, clearly not as good a player, but I recall specifically saying, look, he's still playing on the top line with Scheifele and Connor, so even if he's not good, he's probably still going to get some points. But he did more than that. Like, he had 12 points in his last 7 games from that line. It's been like amazing for anyone who either added him out of free agency or held on, but it's all over now, unfortunately. Wheeler suffered a knee injury in Friday's 4-3 shootout loss to Vancouver, and head coach Paul Maurice said, quote, he's gonna be out a while. So you never want to hear that from the coach. He said that pretty quickly, so it's clearly pretty serious. Hopefully Wheeler comes back at some point this season. But in the meantime, like we said at the top, we've got doors and windows opening and closing, and here there's going to be a window opening for that plum spot with Scheifele, who's having an amazing season, by the way. Like, I could spend a lot of time just like fawning over Scheifele and Kyle Connor if we had the time, which we don't. But we should mention that now there's going to be a spot both on their line, maybe on the power play. For what it's worth, mid-game on Friday when Wheeler went down, it was Paul Stastny who got up to play with Scheifele and Wheeler, and we'll probably have to wait until tomorrow to see what the updated lines are. And this is definitely something that I'll be watching closely, so I would recommend people follow our at Game Day Lions account to see when it's announced who Maurice has playing with Scheifele and Connor. I should say, I said Scheifele and Wheeler. No, Scheifele and Connor, even better. Okay, maybe it'll be Paul Stastny, maybe it'll be someone else. Let's say it is Stastny. Brian, how does he compare to some of these guys, like say to a Barabanov playing with Hurdle and Meyer? Seems like a pretty similar spot and someone that I'd be at least a little bit interested in.
At least a little bit interested in for Paul Stastny, but you look at Mark Scheifele and his historical line mates, and they are already always good players. And when Scheifele plays with guys who aren't known to be good players, like someone like Paul Stastny, who unfortunately has lost that reputation over the years of being someone who can produce, Scheifele has never really turned anyone else into stars. He also hasn't had much opportunity to, but it's not like Scheifele isn't the sort of guy who we get excited to see players exposed to. One, because it's rare, and two, because it's never really panned out. And Scheifele has actually had runs of play with Stastny in the past, and Stastny was pretty quiet in them. I wouldn't expect some middle six guy to come in and suddenly be great with Scheifele. Maybe Andrew Kopp, if he was the guy picked to jump up, maybe some extra minutes for him would do him good, and maybe that would click with Scheifele. But all I'm saying here is that I don't think anyone here is an auto ad because they're playing with Mark Scheifele. I would rather Barabanov, who is already clicking with Hurdle and Meyer, over whoever is added to Mark Scheifele's line. I'm still interested, and I'm still going to watch and see how a couple games play out. But right off the hop, there's no one I'm like, oh yeah, their value is going to jump because they're playing with Mark Scheifele, which is unfortunate. I hope Mark Scheifele proves me wrong.
Yeah, and Kyle Connor. But I think I agree with you. It's not like an auto ad, but definitely you're going to want to watch list and pay close attention and be sure to jump on the player if you start seeing something click, because like we said, Wheeler's going to be out a while, so there's going to be a good opportunity for someone or maybe multiple people if the first option doesn't pan out so well. So since we're talking about injuries, over on Colorado, we've got a couple. Gabriel Landeskog exited Friday's game versus Detroit with a lower body injury. Looks like Kadri is out tonight as well. So actually, Colorado is playing like as we speak versus Florida, so I could bring up their live lines over at Frozen Tools, and it looks like the top line has been Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, and Andre Burakovsky, which is like such an interesting name to have here because I have him in my keeper league that you're in with me also, Brian, and John and I, my co-manager, we were so close to dropping Burakovsky. The only reason he's still on our team is because he was playing Friday, Sunday, and Mike Hoffman was only playing Saturday, so we decided to drop Hoffman instead, and then Burakovsky scored a couple goals on Friday, and now like he's a top liner and someone that would be kind of hard to drop, especially because Landeskog is going to be what's the latest, like a couple weeks at least, like not as
2 weeks at the top of the show. Yeah.
So not like as long term as Wheeler, but definitely, for the next couple of weeks, Burakovsky's in a really sweet spot. It would be a sweeter spot if he was on the top power play. It looks like the top power play so far today has been McKinnon, Rantanen, JT Compher, and Valerie Nichushkin. Then obviously Cale Makar on D. So I don't know. That's the situation there. I don't really have a question I guess we could compare like a Burakovsky to whatever, like Kasha, Nino Niederreiter. I guess probably he'd be a little bit below, though. Hey, those are pretty amazing line mates. So yeah, okay, how about that? Burakovsky compared to Kasha and Nino Niederreiter. Are we talking like in the same category or below, since Burakovsky's been like cold for quite a while?
No, I'd put him in the same category. I was actually gonna I thought you might ask if I'd put him higher, just because we've seen him like do really well. I like Burakovsky in the spot he's in. Not the most stably deployed guy, like you mentioned already. Like his power play role might have been lost. And keep in mind, Logan O'Connor was playing on the top line in the last Avalanche game. So, there is the possibility that O'Connor could replace Burakovsky on the top line again at some point. So you're not guaranteed to have amazing deployment with Burakovsky, but the floor is pretty decent with him at least. And yes, he can go really cold, but he can also have weak winning performances. And that's why I would still be at least as interested in him as I would be Nino and Kasha.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. Hey, I'm happy to have him in that one league. I guess it's just like he runs so cold. Like right now, Nino and Kasha just seem like hot and in a good spot. Though a bit of a hit.
Nino also runs so cold too.
That's
like
true.
all these guys. That's why we're grouping them together.
Yeah, exactly. They're players that might actually be available to people. Bad news for Nino, at least for today. Shams has just shared in the chat here that Aho is going to miss tonight's game due to an illness, hopefully a non-COVID related illness. So yeah, obviously that's going to be a hit. I wonder now watch Svechnikov go with Teravainen. And who knows that? Carolina. Also fantasy, right? I already said it at the top of the show. You get these injuries just hit you last minute. What if you needed this game? What if someone's like away from their phone? All of a sudden now they're not going to swap. Roster bot on our Discord is going to now be hitting all the people who left Aho on their roster with someone on the bench, which I guess won't happen because it's not a busy night of games. But so frustrating. If anyone could come up with a good solution to like play fantasy and somehow not have injuries, I feel like that would be so fun, but I guess that happens in a different universe. I guess if you're playing like a simulated fantasy league, which obviously isn't as fun. Okay, so Brian, let's go to Edmonton. I guess we already talked about Evan Bouchard, but yeah, speaking of injuries, so Zach Hyman was hurt in the last game, though maybe it's not that serious. So here's a couple of tweets here from Daniel Nugent Bowman. So Oilers lose 3-1 to drop their fifth straight game, blah, blah, blah. To add to the concern, Zach Hyman didn't see the ice after taking a hard hit from Brady Shea late in the third. Hyman appeared to be favoring his right shoulder after the hit. And then he followed that up with another tweet saying, I'm just loading it up now here. Dave Tippett said Zach Hyman didn't finish the game for precautionary reasons. That's all something you want to hear. Not what Paul Maurice said. We want what Dave Tippett said. Precautionary reasons was being checked by the medical staff. The Oilers are off tomorrow. That's Sunday. We should know more on Monday. So obviously something for us to keep our eyes on. Hyman's been having a great year. You'd be really bummed if you had to put him in IR. For what it's worth, Jesse Puljujarvi took Hyman's spot on the top power play after Hyman went down, and he'd already been back with McDavid for a while, has 5 points in his last 7 games. So probably if Puljujarvi was available in your free agency after he went cold, and we talked about on the show how we were concerned about him, in the bottom 6, hopefully you already added him. But if somehow Puljujarvi's still available, like now you especially want him, especially if Hyman is going to be out, because that's even a much better spot to not only be at even strength with McDavid, but also on the power play.
Yes, that's all.
There's not much to say.
I concur.
Okay, then over in Minnesota, we've got good and bad news, okay? The good news is Jared Spurgeon is back. The bad news is Jonas Brodin is hurt. So they just swapped because Brodin had taken over from Spurgeon on the top power play. But now I guess Spurgeon just gets that job back. It would have been interesting to see what they would have done if Brodin didn't get hurt, because Brodin had been doing really well. 7 points in his previous 8 games, including 2 recent power play assists versus Edmonton and Toronto. But anyway, now that answers that question. Spurgeon will get the job back. And I think it's a great time to grab him on the cheap because, yeah, he's been cold, but he's on the top power play with Kaprizov, like who's just like we've talked about. I can't just every show just like drool over Kaprizov, but he's just doing so well, and you want people who have exposure to him. Maybe you'll say he's like a Rasmus Anderson, like maybe someone who's, even if he's getting the exposure, he's not especially exciting. But I don't know. I would still grab Spurgeon. I see he already actually has an assist today at even strength on a goal from Alex Goligoski. So I think if you need a D and Spurgeon's available, I'd be interested. And maybe also if he's not available, maybe now's a good time to make a trade offer. Maybe a little bit less of an optimal situation since he just got a point today. But I think he could go on a little bit of a run just with the spot he has on the roster.
He could. I'll go that far. It's unfortunate because Spurgeon was a pretty reliable guy across several categories for a long time. And just as he was finally getting to be the guy who could be like the full-time or fuller-time top power play quarterback, that's when his power play production and other useful production disappeared. He's just been declining in the amount of shots he takes per game over the last couple seasons. And last year, he saw the greatest share of power play time that he's ever seen, aside from back in 2012-13. And he only had 9 power play points in 54 games, which is maybe a 15-point pace over the course of the season on the power play, which is not what you'd hope for from a power play quarterback. And only a 38-point pace over a full 82 games this season. Same deal. 2 power play points in 20 games, despite seeing over a 60% share of power play time with Kirill Kaprizov. So I still have more faith in Spurgeon than I do in someone like Rasmus Anderson or maybe even Noah Dobson, just because we've seen Spurgeon succeed here before. It's just a little dumbfounding that he continues not to, and that he's essentially stopped shooting too is a real kicker. So Spurgeon doing very little of anything. He looks like one of those New York Islanders power play quarterbacks lately, which is a bummer.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'm a little bit too high on Jared Spurgeon. So I think I would grab him if he was in free agency. But
No,
maybe
I would too. Yeah. I would definitely take a shot on Jared Spurgeon. Like I said, we've seen him do it before. We know he's got it in him. It's just been a long time since we've seen it.
Yeah, that's fair. Though, we used to say that about Matt Duchene, and look what he's been doing this season, though he's not going to be doing it for the next little while because he's injured. So let's next go to Nashville, talk about Duchene, who didn't play today versus the Rangers due to an upper body injury. So I'm not sure I think that's the latest update, right? Like, we don't yet know how long he'll be out. Nashville was also without Ryan Johansson, who was put into the COVID protocol. So it might be a bit of a long stretch of him not playing if he ends up going for like that full 10 games. So in the meantime, Nashville ended up beating the Rangers 1-0, and let's see what they were doing here. I didn't write notes because I knew we'll just find out when we actually get the lines from the game. So it looks like Forsberg was playing with Granlund and Philip Tomasino. So there you go. I was actually wondering if maybe it was going to be Tolvanen getting the spot with Forsberg and Granlund, but it looks like it's Tomasino, who scored a goal today, assisted by Forsberg and Alexandre Carrier. Let's take a look at the power play now. Everyone getting behind the scenes of how I look into these types of things. Okay, so Granlund, Forsberg, Colton Sissons, Eli Tolvanen, and Roman Josi. Okay, so it's a classic case, Brian, where I have to ask you, would you prefer Philip Tomasino, who's on the top line, or do you prefer someone like Tolvanen or just nobody? Like, since Tomasino isn't on the top power play, at least Tolvanen is. So, I don't know. Like, clearly, like, Duchene's been doing really well from his spot, though. He's gotten both top line and top power play. Got to imagine Tomasino has a little. But by the way, going into the season, if you recall, we did that show with Victor Nuno from the Fantasy Hockey Life podcast and the last episode of Short Shifts, and he was pretty high on Tomasino and thought he could be a high pedigree rookie. Hasn't worked out like to the same extent maybe as we hoped, but clearly he's got a lot of skill from what he did in previous years before getting to the NHL, and now like pretty good spot playing with Forsberg and Granlund, who have been really hot lately.
Yes. Yeah, it's a nice place to be, and I think I would prefer Tomasino over Tolvanen because nothing really changes for Tolvanen, and he hasn't done anything really great with, like, we talked about him on the last show, that there are like some signs of life and there is still some upside with Tolvanen, but there's not a whole lot that makes him really exciting to stream in. And Tomasino, yeah, like you said at the start of the season, you were actually very excited about him, and this is another opportunity to feel excited about Tomasino, and he's got some pretty good line mates, so he seems like a decent choice to stream in. Like, I really truly don't know what to expect and how much he can deliver. In his last 3 games, he has exactly 1 shot on goal combined. So like, that's disappointing, but at least he has those 2 points to at least interest you a little bit in the meantime. But anyone playing with Philip Forsberg, I'm interested in.
Yeah, and Granlund, who's been good. So yeah, it's a good spot. Maybe it's similar to Barabanov, right? Like, maybe he's not shooting a lot, but he's playing with good line mates. And so we're giving you lots of options for the people in your super deep leagues. If, again, like Kasha and Nino are already taken. Let's go now to some more injuries here in St. Louis. Wait. So Kasha and Nino are taken. Let's go now to St. Louis. So I want to first give a shout out to Short Shifts co-host Louis Ezekiel, who I played a couple this week, and I beat him, but honestly, like, I don't take any joy in this win because Louis got absolutely destroyed by injuries. He has 4 IR spots like all of us. It just wasn't enough. His injury list was just overflowing. Every day someone else was getting hurt. But like, on the plus side, Louis may have just scored on another huge FA grab, because on Thursday he picked up Ivan Barbashev before the weekend, and he continues to dominate. Like, Barbashev is just getting points game in, game out. He scored a goal versus Montreal on Saturday. That brought him to 9 points in his previous 8 games. St. Louis also played today. They ended up losing to Anaheim 3-2. So, by the way, Stoli the goalie, another good game for him. If you want to go back to that segment, yeah, Barbashev, no points. So there you go. Like, a small surprise after like such a good run, but he's not going to get points every game. But like, he's been in a really good spot because St. Louis, just like Lewis's team, has been hit with injuries injuries lately. So Robert Thomas is down. Jordan Kyrou ended up not playing today. I don't think we know the extent of the Kyrou injury. That was something more recent. So they were running lines of Tarasenko, Barbashev, and Buchnevich. And then Ryan O'Reilly with Saad and someone named Logan Brown, who I'll be honest, I don't know who that is. And then Braden Shen with Oscar Sundqvist and Nathan Walker. And then I see that Braden Shen got injured today. The Shams wrote that in our chat. So that's another injury that we're going to have to deal with. And I'll point out that Nathan Walker, who's this guy from Australia who had a hat trick in his first game, I'm not sure if it was his first game ever or his first game this season. He, I think, has another point today. Yeah, Nathan Walker, a goal and an assist today. So maybe Brian and I should just be spending this segment asking you who was Nathan Walker. Okay, so just to summarize my thoughts, because we're getting a lot of updated news here about St. Louis. I haven't even gotten to the goalies yet. But yeah, Barbashev is on a hot run, and he's playing now on what looks like, if not the top line, like a top line with Tarasenko and Buchnevich. And he's also getting power play time with Saad, Tarasenko, Buchnevich, and I guess Scott Perunovich. So I think Barbashev is someone you probably want to consider seriously adding at this point because he's on a super hot run, and he's now getting a good deployment that he didn't even have at the start of the hot run. And then lower down, Brian, who's this Nathan Walker guy? And is he someone we should be paying attention to? Because he's like came out of nowhere and he's like 27 years old. He's barely has an NHL career, and now he's getting points every game.
Nathan Walker, the pride of Australia, drafted by Washington in the 3rd round back in 2014, 89th overall. And yeah, it's been a long time for Nathan Walker, like drafted back in 2014. We're like 7-8 years later, and he's played 28 NHL games, but he has had a pretty solid AHL career, including this season in Springfield. Nathan Walker has 6 goals and 11 assists for 17 points in 19 games. And as you mentioned, he's having this NHL impact now too, which is exciting. The last club, I mean, he was drafted by Washington, as I mentioned, and he got like a bit of a look with them. Nothing really extended. But I always like, it seemed like there was a time where they were trying to work him into the lineup and things just didn't work out. Now it is like, it's kind of a bummer. He and Braden Shen were just getting going, and now Braden Shen's out, and I'm not sure how much that impacts Nathan Walker. If you're looking for like a St. Louis depth forward, though, before you look at Nathan Walker, I'd first look at Barbashev, who, yeah, is on this 56-point pace so far this season. Probably has like an extra power play point. He has 4 power play points from the second unit over 28 games, which is probably a titch high. And he might have scored, a little more. Like his shooting percentage might be a little high too. But overall, he looks pretty decent, and he's seeing better deployment than he's ever seen before. 3.5 minutes more per night compared to last season. That's a huge jump, and the large majority of that coming at even strength. So yeah, he's earned this top 6 role that he's found himself into. So Barbashev looks good there. And then I'm actually really curious to see Logan Brown show up on the second line tonight, playing with Brandon Saad and Ryan O'Reilly. The reason why is because, Elon, you said you don't know who he is. Well, let me tell you about Logan Brown, who was drafted by...
Oh, is it the Senators? Oh, I didn't mean to bring up the Senators. We don't have time. Let's move on.
But no, he's been mentioned on the show before as a possible centerman who could play in the Sens top 6, but things really soured between him and Ottawa, and any time that he was about to get a shot, he got injured. He had some really great AHL production, like basically a point per game in the AHL over the course of his pro career so far, but never a fair swing in the NHL until now. And now he's up to 5 points in 7 games. His ice time's low, but it's going in the right direction. He's been playing 13 or 14 minutes the last few games after starting in a 4th line role. And like I said, he's gotten the look to play with Saad and Ryan O'Reilly. So I think I might look at Logan Brown. I won't say ahead of Nathan Walker. Well, I will, because of his line mates. I'm not sure who Nathan Walker plays with now that Braden Shen is out. But there's a few interesting depth forward options in St. Louis.
I mean, yeah, I'll just take Nathan Walker. I mean, whatever. This is super deep. We don't need to debate Logan Brown versus Nathan Walker, but I actually just added Nathan Walker in my Dynasty League where like no prospects of any like pedigree are ever available. And so it's super rare to even get anyone like, outside of the draft. So I just added him. So take that, Victor. I've got a superstar for free out of free agency. Woo! Okay, Brian, I've already got to do update. This is the fun thing of doing a live show. Like, I like this actually, but like a lot of the things we've talked about, we're getting updates on as we speak. So in Colorado, Andre Burakovsky just scored a power play goal assisted by McKinnon and Rantanen. So I guess he did get on that top power play at some point, at least for a short time, long enough to get a goal. So that probably bodes well for him staying there. So even more exciting. If Burakovsky's both on the top line and top power play, that would be huge. It's now 1-0 Colorado after 2. Darcy Kemper, no, not to jinx him, having a good game so far. That's all I'll say. So, doing his best now that he sees that Francouz is on the bench, breathing down his neck. Also, just to go back to our Jared Spurgeon talk, he's, another point now and a power play assist at that. So maybe he listened to us and is like, hey, I'm good on this power play. I can do this. So, he assisted on a Zuccarello goal. So that's that. By the way, Robin Lehner now in this game. It's 2-2 between Minnesota and Vegas. And Lehner, another bad game so far. 2 goals against on 8 shots. There's some like live updates for you. What do I have next on the actual show? Oh, yeah, on St. Louis, I still wanted to mention kudos to Charlie Lindgren for putting up 2 sterling starts for the Blues with Binnington and Husso out. He had 3 goals against on 57 total shots versus Detroit and Montreal. Word is Binnington should be back next week from the COVID protocol, but Husso might still be out a little while. I wonder if maybe they give Binnington at least the break on Tuesday, let him just back up since he's, maybe getting back up to speed. Why not give Charlie Lindgren another start? So anyways, all that to say, I think I do actually have Charlie Lindgren in one league, and I'm not planning on dropping him just yet. Even when Binnington is announced to be healthy, I'm going to wait until that Tuesday starter is announced because I just have a hunch that maybe Lindgren gets at least one more game. And yeah, he's also someone that, eventually he will get sent back down to the minors, but I have my eye on him. Like, I'm curious to see when's the next time he'll get an opportunity in the NHL. I know Victor said on Thursday that he's not into him. He didn't do well on the Habs, but it seems like he's doing well in the minors this year. He's had 2 good games. So, I don't know. It's a name I'm going to remember for the next time he gets a shot either with St. Louis or someone else. So good job, Charlie Lindgren. Brian, do you want to comment on? No. Okay, so let's continue here. Let's end the show over in Tampa. Corey Perry was on an amazing run before he and the team got shut out by the Sens and Anton Forsberg on Saturday. Before that, though, Corey Perry had a stretch of 10 points in 10 games. Brian, we've brought up so many potentially good streamers on this show, including like a Nathan Walker even. But, we've got a lot of patrons who've been asking us about Corey Perry and whether they should like be adding him or dropping him. Oftentimes it's a question where it's like a list of like, 5 different players and it's like, who would you want the most? And then Corey Perry's on the list. So let's just answer, like, what do you think about Corey Perry and this streak that he just went on? Do you think that we're like in the middle of a roller coaster ride and now we've like already gone, all the way up and now it's time to go down? Or are we still on the way up? And Corey Perry, like, has he shown you anything to convince you that maybe he's for real and as a 36-year-old, he still has some gas in the tank and he can continue to be productive with his role on Tampa?
No. there's the look, there's opportunity in Tampa for someone, with the injuries they have, for someone to step up and do something in like a top 9 role, I guess is what it would be. I was actually more interested this week in what Taylor Radish was doing on the top line. He had a 2-point game against Toronto before the Lightning were shut out, but has been playing with Stamkos and Palat, along with like Matthew Joseph also saw a little bit of time there. But that's why I am, I honestly, if I were to pick a Tampa guy to bring in, I know it's been like fun to see Corey Perry produce, but you asked as a 36-year-old, Elon, I think even when Corey Perry was like a 31-year-old, I was like, he's gonna fall off a cliff. There's not a whole lot to see here from Corey Perry. He's scored 6 times on 24 shots over this run that got him 10 points in 10 games. So he scored on a quarter of his shots. It was great that he was taking 3 per game, and he's actually been a decent shot taker this year. So we'll at least give him that. But also we can't forget that in the 16 games leading up to this run, Corey Perry had but 1 single point. So I think obviously Corey Perry is not 10 points in 10 games. He's also not 1 point every 16 games. But right now he has 11 points in 27 games for an 82 game pace of about 33 points, which is exactly in between his 82 game pace from the 2 prior seasons. So I feel pretty comfortable thinking that that's who Corey Perry is. And anyone can get hot. That's great. But if everything were balanced over the rest of the season, I don't think we'd expect a whole lot of production from him.
Okay, man. I agree with you 100%. Just had to bring him up because he's on a hot streak, and that's my job. But yeah, it's nice to see, but not something I expect either. You bring up Taylor Radish. I saw you were like tweeting about Taylor Radish from our account and saying anyone listen to Ben Queller, who is like a singer that I recall you used to be being into. And I think I remember I listened to a couple of his albums. But like, what do they have to do with each other?
Okay, so Ben Queller was in this band called Radish, and I
Oh,
and I think it was spelled with a Y, but only one D. So similar to Taylor Radish's name, and was like there's this big bidding war from all the record labels to sign his band Radish because they were supposed to be the next big thing, and that just fizzled out completely. And then he went solo and did okay.
yeah.
So
I
there it
mean,
is.
not well enough to get like more than what was like 2 likes on your tweet. I think
Oh,
most
I'm
people.
surprised it got that many. It was like purely self-indulgent.
Yeah. Well, congrats on having one of our worst
Sorry.
performing tweets of the year. But
Sometimes I just do that.
it's like 2 for you, 1 for me. And that was definitely one just for Brian.
It was actually the one thing I did notice is that both those other tweets that I retweeted were also from past Decembers. So December is Taylor Radish gets our attention month. He's done it again.
Okay, well, good for you. I have a feeling we're not going to talk about him for the rest of the season, but I guess we'll wait and see. So that's been another fun show, Brian. The 2 hours have just flown by. I've really had a blast talking through all the teams. It's also fun with everyone in the chat giving us updates on what's going on in the games as we speak. And hopefully by the end of this, we've given people a lot to think about in terms of players you maybe want to drop and also lots of potential options that you may want to grab both on D, in net, at forward. I guess there's no other positions that are available to you unless you're like Patty here watching CFL, and then you could get to a lot of other positions in other sports. But yeah, that's what we've got for you as far as what's going on in the NHL. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. If you like it and you want more, obviously you want to subscribe to us on your Apple Podcast, Spotify, whatever, so you get your shows automatically, both our Sunday shows and the short shifts episodes, the 2 that come every week by the great Ben Burnett and Louis Ezekiel. Then you also probably want to be subscribed to the Stream Scheme, which is a really great podcast. I guess you'd call that like a sister podcast of Keeping Karlsson. And Dave every week does a show where he looks at the schedule for the following week and recommends players that you may want to stream in specifically for their schedule. It's really great. Like, it's not only like useful, it's also just really funny and a very quick listen. So check out the latest Stream Scheme. You just search for that on, again, like Apple Podcasts or whatever. We would love to hear from you with any feedback. So tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know what you thought. If you like the show, we'd very much appreciate a 5-star review with a nice comment over on Apple Podcasts. That's a great way to help support the show without, costing yourself anything. But it's really like a big favor you do that helps us raise in the rankings so more people can find us. And then if you really, really like the show and you want to actually support the show with your wallet, you can become a patron of Keeping Karlsson, and we really try to make it worth your while. We ask for $5 a month, and in exchange, you get access to our patron-only Discord server, which is just a really fun place to be. And by the way, I should also say thanks to everyone who is a patron. Like, you guys are making just my life so fun all the time. Every time you check in, there's always like useful, just like the Stream Scheme. It's like useful information and also just a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. I really love the community that we've built up there. So yeah, come join us over at keepingkarlsson.com/patron. We also have some other perks for becoming a patron. You could read all about it at that website that I already said, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. But okay, with that, Brian, let's finish this baby off. Let's cue the outro music, and why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right, this episode. Sorry. All right, this episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Flash, Christopher, Andrea, Tom, Derek, David, Rob, and Patty. Thank you for your extra support to make sure episodes of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast keep coming. Shout out to okay. Shout out to our Cupful coordinator, Kevin Hebert, and our team of co-commissions keeping the Cupful running smoothly, kkupfl.com. Thanks to Shams Benamor for keeping the amazing stream of fantasy news rolling on our suite of NHL Fantasy News Twitter accounts. Get a pencil or just search them on Twitter now as I say them. You want to join them. Follow them on at Game Day Lines, at Game Day News NHL, and at Game Day Goalies. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey Frozen Tools. Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, NBC Sports Edge, and Yahoo.
Is Frozen Tools in that list?
Yes, it's second.
Okay, good. All right, great job as always, Brian. Before I let everyone go, let me just quickly say happy birthday to my wife, Dina. We're going to hopefully have a really fun day tomorrow. I'll try to get this show edited in the next 2 hours so I don't spend any time during the birthday on the podcast. But yeah, thanks everyone again. Happy birthday, Dina. And we'll see you all in a week for the next Mega Show.
Until then, happy birthday, Dina. And I'm sure she will too. And I encourage you to do everything you can to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Boom, we did it. Thanks, everyone. That was a fun one. Thanks, Brian. What a pro.
There were like no edit points for like the first half of the show.
Yeah, I still have a bunch.
It was pretty strong.
Yeah, I think it was strong as well. I think they're like all easy ones.
The majority of mine I think were just like coming in late.
Yeah, it might be just that. Those are the easiest.
Good job.
Cool. Good job. Talk to you later. I'm gonna head out.
Thanks to everyone in the YouTube chat for being here with us. Great work. Thanks for keeping it lively.
You're the best. We have a really solid live chat here. I think it really actually helps the show be better. Like
Agree.
It's really useful.
Agree 1000%.
And fun. That's always the best. When you're getting like value and fun, then you know that life is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Patty almost like I believed her when she wrote like Coyotes to Hamilton. I was like, I could see it. That'd be fun. But just a joke. I went on Twitter just to verify. Okay, see ya.